Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. January 1st, Year 1. The Treaty of Unification is signed, marking the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi War that almost ended the world. All individual countries would hold their previous identities but be included in the Sanin alliance, named after the title held by a man who lived with a dream of world peace but did not survive long enough to see it a reality. All leaders present at the conclave signed the agreement. January 2nd, Year 1 Astronomical Unit. After unification, the hero of the war, Naruto Uzumaki, went into self-exile. He was widely known as the strongest person in the world and believed that if he stayed allied with his birth home of Konoha, it would make the fledgling alliance strained. June 1st, Year 33 Astronomical Units. An incident with a distraught Biju, Isobu the Sanbi, Three Tails, to be exact, results in the large amounts of destruction and the death of 24 humans. To counteract the tension and anger at the demon, Naruto returns from his self-exile and creates a large island south of the main continent. He convinces all the Biju to move to the minor continent so that nothing similar happens again. Most had been uncomfortable with the sudden growth of humanity and were glad to have such a large space all to their own again. The others did it only because Naruto asked. Many were once again wary of the Biju, but still some remembered how they saved humanity in the Fourth Great Shinobi War. Over the years, the people began to trust the Biju, eventually celebrating each of them individually. 9 days throughout each year was dedicated to one of the 9 Biju. Most were random, but October 10th was indisputably the day of the fox. February 19th, Year 103 Astronomical Units. Rumors that sailors found another continent west of the mainland could be heard in most households. March 2nd, Year 103 Astronomical Units. A government-funded expedition was sent west over the ocean. Another continent was found, also inhabited by humans. The language of the Westerners was similar enough that it only took a few days to work out communication. The newly discovered culture did have chakra, though it was not as potent as the Easterners. The Easterners were heavily reliant on their technology, which was far more advanced than that of the Western continent. Agreements and trade routes are created, though it will be difficult with 4 weeks of ocean between the two continents. Or rather, it would be challenging had the East not have long since created a motor that worked on electricity, a powerful advancement to the steam-powered engines the Westerners still used. It enabled them to traverse the seas with much greater ease. Rumors were that the West was also trying to make a vehicle that would allow humans to fly. April 14th, Year 103, the first updated map of the world is released. It marked the eastern continent with the name Sanin, the western continent with the name Eden, as its inhabitants called it, and the southern continent created to isolate the Biju with the name Sado, Sanctuary. January 2nd, 105 AU. A bombing of Suna ended with 182 people dead and many more injured. It is found to be blamed on a small group of Westerners that believed that the Sanians, people of Sanin, were trying to poison their society and destroy it. Outraged, the government of Sanin demanded retribution. Not enough people in Eden liked or trusted Sanin enough to side with them, and the anger and opposition sparks a war. This marks the beginning of the War of Duality. The War of Duality was a brutal and bloody slaughter on both sides. On one side, the people of Sanin had far more potent chakra and generations of powerful ninja abilities. On the other, the people of Eden had far more advanced weaponry. Whenever Sanin would create or rediscover another powerful ability for its soldiers, Eden would mass-produce the next most outrageous weapon, and vice versa. By the time it ended, no one was quite sure who was the most inhumane. July 3rd, 143 AU. In what was promising to be a great battle, the war came to an abrupt end. A great beast, the likes of which had never been seen by anyone living in either armies, sprouted from the ground with a roar. The beast, a raccoon of sorts, that towered over everything there, controlled what seemed like an infinite amount of sand. Each and every soldier on both sides were individually ensnared by the sands, keeping them from doing anything besides breathing and looking terrified. It was the man who was controlling the monstrous raccoon that stopped the fighting, however. He was a man with bright blonde hair and lines tripling each cheek. He stood atop the beast without fear and looked over the armies with calm blue eyes. While those of Eden did not recognize him, the Sannin soldiers knew instantly whom he was. Naruto Uzumaki. The man should have been well over a century old, but the power he held was unmistakable. Not a single soldier died that day. July 4, 144 AU. The Treaty of Division was signed. It ended the war and stated that neither Eden nor Sannin would attack each other. Period. With the war that lasted almost 40 years suddenly stopping with no winner, there was obviously still tension between the two factions. If Naruto hadn't been watching over both governments, literally being on both sides of the planet at the same time, and swiftly knocking out and locking up anyone who showed any hostility, who knows what would have happened. Over the coming years, the two continents would slowly stop wishing for blood and even become allies. August 27, 145 AU. The first child conceived between a soldier of Sannin and one of Eden was born. On its own this is rather impressive that it happened too soon, but there was something else much more remarkable that happened. During the War of Duality, both sides had done all they could to win, including enhancing the soldiers themselves. The Sannin soldiers were implanted with what they called seeds of Izanagi. It was based off of the stories of Naruto where he learned to use the chakra given off by nature to augment his body. The seeds grew inside of their host's body and fueled them with natural chakra, making them faster, stronger, healthier, and longer lasting. On Eden's side, they used a fledgling understanding of nanorobotics to replace all the nerves in the soldier's body. It allowed them to process thoughts 1,000 times faster and raised their reaction time by 600%. What's amazing about the birth of a child between the two soldiers was that SGE was naturally born with both a seed of Izanagi and enhanced nervous system inside of her. 165 astronomical units. A fourth continent was found, though it is smaller and had no human life. Not many people are eager to move there due to the extremely cold environment. This land is given the name Yak. 298 astronomical units. A mining expedition in northern Yak finds remains of something. It is never known what is those that found it never return. 299 astronomical units. A large number of unexplained disappearances occur along the coast of Sannin. Though they are technically allies, there is still bad blood between the two main continents. Rumors start to sprout up that the cause of the disappearances was Eden. Tensions rise. January 3, 300 AU. Hundreds upon hundreds of creatures pour into the city of Kumogakure no Sato. They are described as charred human husks implanted with bright blue synthetics. While easy to disable, they were difficult to fully shut down and came in seemingly unending waves. Unprepared and not having a substantial military at the time, Sannin is slowly overtaken by the Husk army. However, before the Husks can move out of Lightning Country, reinforcements from Eden arrive and hold them off long enough for Sannin to organize and exterminate all of them in a combined effort. Unknown to anyone at the time, this move was what forever cemented an alliance between Sannin and Eden. January 4, 300 AU. Once the heat had died down, it is found through various methods that the Husks originated from an abandoned mining zone on the northern tip of Yak. A recon team is sent to investigate. January 6, 300 AU. Only one member of the recon team made it back. She reported that they found a large ship unlike anything ever seen before, massive in size and deep metallic purple. She said that upon entering her team began acting weirdly. Half the team tried to kill the others and had to be put down. The rest killed themselves. Shortly after finishing her report, the last member of the team tried to kill her commanding officer while screaming about cleansing the galaxy. She was killed on the spot. January 11, 300 AU. Another wave of Husks invaded, this time on Eden soil. Furthermore, some of them did not fully resemble humans, more like large insects on two legs. Worse still, many Husks came into battle with powerful, futuristic weaponry, the likes of which had never been seen before. As an idea of combating the computerized corpses, a group of scientists designed a supercomputer that could hack their synthetics and kill them en masse without risking human life. It worked at first, but the mechanics of the Husks evolved, for lack of a better term, and became immune to the computer. In response, an even larger group of scientists designed and built a completely new computer that would learn, adapt, and evolve on its own. The artificially designed adapting modem, or ADAM, was the first artificial intelligence ever made by man, and it worked perfectly. February 2, 300 AU. A problem arose with the use of Atom to kill the husks. The AI could only work over short distances from where it was based. When the husks started avoiding the area, it became useless. An idea was brought to the best seal masters Sanin had to offer. February 8, 300 AU. The most complicated seal ever designed was finished, ending at over 800 feet in diameter. It was mostly done by the man who came up with the idea, whose skills with seals amazed the 4 other seal masters he called to help. The Investigatus seal, Seal of Discovery, was a massive Fuinjutsu version of an AI in that it could learn, adapt, and evolve on its own. It could wirelessly connect to another type of seal he made, called the Izanami seal, no matter the distance. The Izanami seal would be grafted into the skin of every soldier willing, allowing instantaneous transmittance of information between each of them. The Investigatus seal, or as it became to be known as, Eve, would work in tandem with Atom to send the AI's signal across all distances to every Izanami seal. This in itself would not do anything as the signal could not be emitted in a helpful way from anything non-mechanical. Luckily, the enhanced nervous system created during the War of Duality, alpha nerves, they were called, was now present in roughly 73% of the population. It was still unknown why anyone with at least a single parent who possessed alpha nerves was naturally born with them, but not many were complaining. Whenever a husk got within a dozen feet of anyone with alpha nerves and an Izanami seal, the synthetic zombie would drop dead without so much as a finger needing to be raised in defense. Seeing as the combination got the desired results, almost every person with alpha nerves volunteered to have the Izanami seal grafted onto their person. This had the unfortunate effect of almost anyone who did not possess both augmentations to be targeted and killed by the husks. By the end of the month, everyone was either invulnerable to husks or already dead. The cybernetic zombies became nothing more than a laugh to look at as they shambled around and died. Then they were just an annoyance to clean up. March 1, 300 AU. Once the last grafting of the Izanami seal was finished, the genius of a man who came up with it, and Eve dropped the henge he had held for a month straight and revealed that he was the 300-year-old war hero, Naruto Uzumaki. After a brief talking with the government leaders, he returned to self-exile in Sado. August 13, 300 AU. The last husks were reported to be dead. It also seemed that no more were being made as there was nothing left to drag victims away to be changed. Still, no one wanted to go and check on the monstrous ship that was reported to be in Yok. September 8, 300 AU. Though they are relatively new, the human-made satellites orbiting Gaia are able to give a blurry image of Yok from space. It shows a massive dark object against the white snow, moving southwest towards Sanin. Evacuations are ordered from the coast. September 11, 300 AU. The construct emerges from the waters onto the island nation of Mizu no Kuni. Images show it to be a gigantic machine in the shape of an insect, though a lobster might be more sensible seeing as it rose from the ocean. A powerful crimson laser tore through the country, setting everything ablaze. Though the civilians had long since been evacuated, the military personnel stationed there to fight stood little chance and were completely annihilated. By dusk, the island country was completely destroyed. The metallic insect seemed to go into a sort of hibernation and was theorized to be recharging. It would have been easy to go on the offensive, but no one knew what they could do against it if they did. So both sides waited. December 25, 300 AU. The annual gift-giving holiday known as Christmas that started almost exactly 3 centuries ago was tense. It turned to panic when word of the destructive insect was moving again spread. December 26, 300 AU. The metallic creature flew across the ocean. Apparently it spent the last few months regaining the energy to do so. Just as it came over the coast of Fire Country and a great red light began to build up, its gong of a battle cry was overpowered by a cornucopia of animalistic roars. As the evacuations had not finished, both civilian and military had front row seats to the side of the purple floating machine be struck simultaneously by 9 blasts of dark energy. The resulting explosion came in the form of a giant blue and black mushroom cloud, a mixture of the substance that made up the machine's power core and demonic energies. It was not hard to find the source of the blasts that ended the war machine. Not far from the coast, 8 giant beasts and 1 human-shaped figure stood in all their glory. The year 300 was now commonly known as the Year of Reaping. Naruto and the 8 Biju eventually returned to Sado, but only after much celebrating and cheering. Many of the demons were uncomfortable with the praise at first, not used to it, but they all enjoyed as much of the party as they could. Many were interested in the substance that erupted from the Reaper, as the machine became known as. As far as it was known, none of the construct itself survived, so all they could study was the blue substance that spread all over the atmosphere. It was dubbed Element Zero, not really for any overly scientific reason, but because all studies gave zero results besides saying it was radioactive. June 25, 301 AU. A child was born. Unsurprisingly, it naturally had a seed of Izanagi and alpha nerves. Also, after a conference between the heads of government and Eve, the intelligent Fuinjutsu manipulated the Izanami seals slightly so that any offspring would naturally have them grafted into their skin as well. What was really surprising was that the child did not look normal, was the word. She could pass as a human, yes, but there were slight differences. Her musculature system was more compact in some areas and larger in others. Her pupils were larger than normal. And her finger and toenails were sharper. It was believed to be a rare birth defect. June 27, 301 AU. Another child was born. He was perfectly normal, except that his spine was twice as long, resulting in a tail. As he grew older, the tail grew hair only slightly darker than the hair on his head. Now people were intrigued. July 7, 301 AU. Another child was born. He was normal in every way to the naked eye. It was proven though that as he grew, the Izanagi seed that grew inside of him had a large amount of radiation that matched that of Element Zero. Years later, he would be able to use his chakra in new and strange ways, such as telekinesis. 305 astronomical units. Large amounts of research finally found results and answers for why 1 in every 3 children was born with strange animalistic qualities and why 1 in every 5 children had abilities to manipulate their chakra in ways not dissimilar to that of what the legendary Rinnegan could do. The source was found to be the killing of the Reaper. The insanely large amount of demonic chakra from the Biju and Naruto did little to those already born at the time, but the recessive trait they develop would matter greatly when someone conceives a child. The children with the telekinetic abilities of sorts were caused by the Reaper itself exploding and the resulting influx of Element Zero. The different-looking humans were called Hanyo, not out of spite but simply because that's what they were, part human and part demon. The radiated children were called biotics. Many were uncomfortable with the Hanyos because of their looks, but no violence ever sprung up. Parents of Hanyos cared for their children and thus did not mind others that looked odd as well. Plus, most looked at as, if the Biju are demons, what's so wrong with being like them? The Biju were seen as great heroes after all. October 11, 305 AU. A Hanyo child is proven to possess biotic abilities, answering a question many wondered. July 16, 969 AU. Though it had been approached often, the idea of leaving the planet never really meant much to anyone until today. Through a combination of technology and Fuinjutsu that had become commonplace, the first spaceship made to carry life was finished and set to launch with its crew of 1 AI and 5 humans, 2 of which were Hanyos and 1 a biotic. Its destination, the moon. Shortly before it launched, the crew was met face to face with a legend in the form of a young blonde man. It had been a long time since Naruto had last been seen out of Sado and it was an unspoken rule that no one was to got there. But he had not aged since 300 astronomical units. He just smiled and joked to watch out for the soulless corpse of the Jubi that was buried on Luna. Not even the crew themselves knew if they should be honored at meeting him, or terrified at the reminder that no one else had managed remembered. November 26, 1011 AU. By now, shuttles moving off from the surface of Luna and Gaia was commonplace, but today another special ship was being launched. This one was set to go to the 4th planet from the Sun, Inari. Only one member of the famous moon landing crew was part of this one. The other 3 surviving members stood off to the side next to an blonde legend to salute the explorers. April 10, 1148 AU. A recent census showed that Gaia held a population of over 21.5 billion humans. Luna had long since been terraformed, a process that took nearly a year for the relatively small planetoid, and now housed a population of 11 billion humans. Inari and its 2 moons Karama and Phobos had been terraformed as well, the latter two having been physically tripled in size to keep them stable and to have workable gravity. They each held a population of roughly 6 billion, 2 billion, and 1.5 billion respectively. But today, a deep-sea research team found something on the bottom of the Deseado Ocean in the southern hemisphere of Inari. The remains of technology by what are being called the Protheans send all of humanity into a frenzy. Never before had it been proven that alien life exists, though more than a few speculated that the Reaper was not of their home planet. Specialties used what they could from the ruins to upgrade their own technology, but not as much as what people wanted came out of it. The formula for Medigel was useful for hospitals and caught on quickly, but other than that nothing really changed. Prothean weapons were so different from their human equivalents that nothing could be taken from them. Maybe they would have been helpful had humanity still used the guns of Eden from the War of Duality, but it was far too late now. Omni tools were almost hilariously pointless with Skynet. Skynet was the unbreakable connection between all humans that was made from Adam, Eve, the Alpha Nerves, and the Izanami seals. When compared to the Protheans' Omni tool, they were actually very similar except that the Omni tool was a wristband-like device with a holographic interface. Skynet was literally inside your head. It also worked nearly 100 times faster, had no known distance it could not work over, and could not get lost or stolen. It was not even a contest to which one was better. The Prothean ships interested some people with how they ran on Element Zero, and the Inari government scheduled for one to be built. But with Element Zero being as rare as it was and no one wanting to ride on a ship powered by it, the explosion from the Reaper power core was still well known. The project was dropped before it could even really begin. 1,213 astronomical units. Humans land on the planet Venus, the second planet from the Sun. Due to its toxic atmosphere it takes 50 years to fully terraform, unlike Inari's 21. 1,298 astronomical units. Humans land on the planet closest to the Sun, Mercury. It is deemed too difficult to terraform due to the close proximity to the Sun and is only used as a source for mining minerals and questionable experiments. 1,401 astronomical units. A freelance company springs up with an unusually large amount of funding from places unknown, and with its only objective being the advancement of humanity. The three branches, or heads, as they are more commonly known as, of the company are agriculture, exploration, and military. The company's name is Cerberus. As part of the agriculture head, Cerberus used an almost unbelievable amount of money to create a more workable terraforming sequence. When it is finished, Mercury is made perfectly habitable and twice its original size in just under 5 months. The new sequence is so effective that it is estimated that Inari could have completely terraformed in 2 months if this process had been known at the time. The exploration head spent seemingly endless amounts of cash to make spaceships faster, longer lasting, bigger, and easier to live in. It was this branch that figured out the secret to artificial gravity. The military head upgraded all commonly used weapons from the most mundane of kunai knives to the latest combat seals. This was much slower going seeing as how no one was expecting a war anytime soon. 1,420 astronomical units. Human ships made it past the asteroid belt and into the area of the gas giants. The fifth planet from the Sun, Susano, named after the giant storm on the planet that was visible even from space, had dozens of moons orbiting it. The 4 largest were quickly enlarged and terraformed. They were named Case-Cage, Mizukage, Reikage, and Tsuchikage after the leaders of Old Sanin. Every other moon remaining that was too small to inhabit were dragged together into a 5th planetoid that was much bigger than all other moons, being nearly 3/4 the size of Gaia. It was also terraformed and named Hokage. They were designed with special atmospheres to absorb large amounts of light so that they could be habitable even though they were so far away from the Sun. 1421. Plans to turn the gas planet of Susano into a habitable planet began to circulate the Skynet rumor mill. 1,432 astronomical units. Human ships made it to the 6th planet, another gas giant called Saturn. Governments and Cerberus worked on a new and bizarre idea instead of making a special atmosphere like the 5 moons of Susanu, which was a very expensive project. The idea was to build a giant metal ring that surrounded the planet and poured light down on it. While it is possible to create metal from chakra, The amount of supplies Cerberus used was so large that everyone was stumped as to where they got them from. Only strip mining a planet or large moon could hope to get that much metal. 1,455 astronomical units. The largest building project humanity had ever taken part in was finished. The halo that surrounded Saturn was so large that it was successfully cultivated and given its own atmosphere. The outside of the ring was both inhabitable and able to grow plants, but the inside was covered entirely in fuinjutsu to pour light down as it orbited Saturn, effectively making night and day. Already immigrants were moving to the halo, named Michael after the angel of an old Eden religion. 1,459 astronomical units. Susano is successfully terraformed to have a habitable atmosphere and gravity. The gigantic storm it was named for vanished as well, but due to its distance from the sun it is constantly very dark. The answer was to build another halo and put it around the planet. 1,461 astronomical units. Humans reached the seventh planet from the sun, Tsukuyomi. 1,462 astronomical units. Saturn is successfully terraformed. With the light given off from Halo Michael, and a few adjustments to lower the gravity to tolerable levels, it was perfectly habitable. 1,469 astronomical units. The Halo Raphael is completed around Susano. The artificial light given off from the inside of the ring allows people to comfortably live on the surface of Susano. Unlike the construction of Michael that only had Cerberus to build it, Raphael had the combined effort of Cerberus and the governments of Susano's 5 moons. The combined effort made the process that previously took 23 years to complete only 10. 1,470 astronomical units. The 8th planet in the Sol system, Amaterasu, was reached. 1,472 astronomical units. Tsukuyomi was terraformed and the halo Gabriel that surrounded it was finished. This halo also took only 11 years, with only Cerberus working on it. It proved that their method of building halos had improved. 1,473 astronomical units. The leaders of Cerberus declared a new idea that most people took as a bad laugh than being serious. They said that they would take the asteroid belt that separated the first 4 planets from the last 5 and turn it into a massive halo that encircled the Sun and inner planets just as the belt did. Many laughed at the idea, especially because there was no real reason to build it at all. It would not be needed to give light to anything as it did not surround a planet, and it would be impossible to gather enough supplies even if they were given a century. Or so they said. 1,474 astronomical units. Cerberus began construction on the greatest halo, alone. With half of their personnel working on the halo to surround that they were actually serious, many become intrigued with the ideal of this great halo. It slowly became recognized that humanity was starting to overpopulate. Whether this insanely large halo would help or not, no one knew for sure. 1,476 astronomical units. The governments of Gaia, Luna, Inari, Karama, and Phobos joined in helping Cerberus. 1,477 astronomical units. The governments of Venus, Mercury, Susano, Hokage, Casecage, Mizukage, Reikage, and Tsuchikage joined in the effort to build the massive halo. 1,478 astronomical units. The large section of Cerberus that was working on Amaterasu's halo, Uriel, finished and moved to help the main section in the big construction. 1,479 astronomical units. All remaining planetary governments joined in the effort. 1,480 astronomical units. The 9th and final planet, Pluto, was landed on by humans. It was small and many did not even consider it a planet, but that wouldn't stay like that for long. 1,481 astronomical units. Pluto was risen to nearly 4 times its original size and terraformed. A halo was scheduled to be built around it, but the system's governments did not want the working forces to split in half like they did for Uriel. Instead, every able ship from the construction of the Great Halo was sent to Pluto to build that halo instead. The halo surrounding Pluto, Camael, was finished in a stunning 7 months. Morals boosted by the accomplishments, the workforce returned to constructing the Great Halo. 1,483 astronomical units. The Pluto government, young as it was, joined in on the efforts of building the Great Halo. 1,485 astronomical units. Governments had been slowly and carefully formed for the people living on the halos Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. At this time, they believed that they were stable enough with the new and strange lifestyle to send help to join the construction. 1,486 astronomical units. Uriel and Camail governments joined the effort. 1,491 astronomical units. The special atmospheres of Hokage, Casecage, Mizukage, Reikage, and Tsuchikage that were made to absorb light started to fail. The air was becoming thin, and if it was not fixed with 2 years, the atmospheres would be non-existent. Quickly, the construction force split into 5 groups to build a halo for each moon. The mere idea of saving whole cities by the dozen spurred on the teams, and they finished all 5 halos in 13 months. The faulty, special atmospheres were replaced with normal ones. 1,499 astronomical units. The Great Halo, given the name of the angel in an old Eden religion who united humankind. Sandalphon is complete and habitable, being finished at 24,000 kilometers in width and just over 460 million kilometers in diameter. The 1400s are known as the Century of Gold. The year 1500 itself was seen as one giant blur, as a giant party seemed to take up the entire 365 days. This is truly one of the highest points humanity had ever been at. It had made every surface in its entire solar system inhabitable. The spacefaring ships had changed greatly from the cramped, slow ships of the lunar landing. It was not uncommon for some people to live in giant spaceships that doubled as cities, commonly called star cities. Crime was at an all-time low, nearly non-existent with the great influx of jobs that Cerberus' many projects gave. While not enemies, the new governments all over the Sol system were bound to have problems, but now an agreement was taken all of the governments as they worked together on Sandalphon. By the end of the century, the governments formed a group that would make decisions for the solar system as a whole. It was to be called the United Planets, but that was considered to be discriminatory against those who lived on halos. So instead they named it the Systems Alliance. A humongous baby boom in the Century of Gold took the population from the 50 billion it was at before to over 2.5 trillion. And that's where a problem began to be shown. The population would not drop down anytime soon unless war broke out, and no one wanted that. Combined with the average human lifespan being 350 years, Hanyo living slightly longer and biotics slightly less, and they would run out of space sooner or later. Granted, it would take a long time now with the halos and terraformed planets, but it would happen eventually. 1,509 astronomical units. To make it easier, the massive construct of Sandalphon was divided into 6 sections that could be considered countries. They were named Tendo, Shirado, Ningendo, Chikushodo, Gakido, and Jigokudo, and each had its own government body. 1,511 astronomical units. The 6 governments of Sandalphon considered themselves stable enough to ask for being part of the Systems Alliance. They were accepted without argument. 1,537 astronomical units. A cruiser discovered a large construct in deep space. It was described as a giant tuning fork-shaped thing, made from a dark purple metal that had not been seen since the Reaping War. It was quickly proven to be made similarly as the Reapers, and the Systems Alliance ordered every human to stay as far away from it as possible. No one was stupid enough to risk it. 1,672 astronomical units. The Systems Alliance decided to disband all standing militaries. This was more of a formality than anything else, as the only planet that still had a military at this point was Gaia, and it had not been used in centuries, all others having already been disbanded. Many expected that without the military that crime would rise. Instead, it lowered greatly as many of the ex-soldiers joined the police. 1798. Unemployment began to rise with the population, which now numbered over 3 trillion strong. People began to get nervous at what could happen. 1800. The Systems Alliance called in Cerberus, who still seems to have infinite supplies and money, and proposed to them the idea of leaving the Sol system with newly created and untested technology that should allow ships to enter hyperspace and, theoretically, move at speed faster than light. Cerberus agrees. 1805. The unemployment almost completely disappeared at the construction of a great fleet of ships. The goal was to move 3 billion volunteer individuals out of the Sol system and into the next. They had no shortage of volunteers at least, and the ships could easily recycle breathable air and grow food. Many believed that the ships would make the journey, and after 5 years of testing the FTL, faster-than-light, travel method of entering hyperspace, it looked promising. The problem was that no one knew what would happen to Skynet. It worked fine in connecting people from all the way from Mercury to Pluto, but no one knew if it would work from one system to the next. When asked, Eve said that she had no way of knowing, but that she would do all that she could to keep everyone connected. She even called in her father, Naruto Uzumaki, to oversee her constantly growing seal array and change it if necessary. The fact that such a legend was partaking in this giant immigration stirred many to help and volunteer as well. October 24, 1806 AU. The immigration fleet was finished, filled, and ready to launch. It consisted of 359 ships, with the largest by far being the SSV, System Alliance Space Vehicle, Noah's Ark, reaching a great 500 kilometers in length. With cheers and goodbyes, the fleet engaged the hyperspace and immediately disappeared from Skynet, something that all previous times meant you were dead. October 31, 1806 AU. The week had passed in an almost unnatural depression for the Sol system. Everyone was connected to Skynet, so everyone felt the sudden absence of 3 billion people ranging from babies to elders. It was to be expected, as hyperspace is basically another dimension, but no one knew if they would ever return. It was with a start on one Saturday on the last day of the month that Adam sent a blaring message through the Skynet, purposely giving everyone a mild wake-up shock in the process. The immigration fleet has returned to Skynet. The immigration fleet has returned to Skynet. People cheered like never before, screaming in celebration to the heavens. In later years, October 31st will become a holiday of fear and reward where people of all ages, though mostly children, dress up in scary costumes and in return get candy. It was named after the man who led the entire fleet, Hachiro Halloween. 1850. The second inhabited solar system, the Proxima system, had all 4 planets and 11 moons terraformed, and the Noah's Ark was taken apart to build a great halo that surrounded the system's sun. The Great Halo was named Noah for obvious reasons. 1991. Cerberus made a major advancement was made in hyperspace technology, allowing ships to travel greater distances at a fraction of the time. For instance, the famous week of travel from Sol to Proxima was shortened to 2.5 hours. 2,000 astronomical units. The largest fleet ever made, consisting of 2,015 ships, was set for launch. Many of the ships were star cities that were outfitted with hyperspace drives. The spreading fleet was loaded up with nearly half the population of the Sol system, numbering a staggering 2.5 trillion people. The fleet launched off in every direction to spread to any and all nearby systems. All passengers had re-entered Skynet within the day. 2001 astronomical units. The Systems Alliance, which had broadened to include the governments in the Proxima system and will probably do the same for other systems once they establish governments, realized that humanity was growing very quickly. They had had close calls before but always managed to avoid the problems that came with overpopulation by expanding outwards. They knew that eventually, they would not be able to do so anymore. To solve this, they passed a law stating that every couple could only have a maximum of 3 children. Many were angry with this and raged in the forms of strikes and such, but the alliance was unwavering. Luckily, no riots broke out and the anger lowered to a simmer by the end of the next decade. By the end of the century, it was seen as an unspoken way of life that everyone followed, like how no one steps on Sato soil, ever. Years, decades, centuries, millennia, humans advanced, seals advanced, artificial intelligences advanced, halos advanced, ships advanced, life advanced. Many more Prothean ruins were found, though little was ever accomplished by them except some pretty pictures of the stars and useless blueprints. 3 more large purple constructs were found floating in odd corners space, and each were avoided like the plague. Cerberus, once a company that held greater power than any one government, became smaller and smaller but still held the same respect. It was seen as a great honor to be one of the few thousands that work for Cerberus, but they have only had relatively small advancements since the building of the first Great Halo and the SSV Noah's Ark. June 18, 5149 AU. A small group of scientists were given permission by the Systems Alliance, after 2 years of debate mind you, to study one of the 5 known purple constructs. The allowance of going near the object surprised many, but many more were curious about what could be found out about the things. The group of 45 scientists and 12 civilians, for piloting and manual labor mostly, approached the purple construct orbiting the sun of the Utopia system. It did not take humanity long to figure out what the constructs, dubbed mass relays, did. Though they were faster and traveled farther than current hyperspace technology allowed, the lack of being able to broadly target where to go and the obvious relation between it and the Reaper dissuaded people from activating anymore right away. Still, it was used to its only advantage, and when needed, humans spread even farther without argument. Well, without very much of it, that is. One thing everybody loved about mass relays, though, was that you could stay connected to Skynet while traversing between them. Even if it was only for less than a day, being separated from the mass of information and communication that you've been connected to for almost your entire life is never fun. The main reason anyone was studying the mass relays was to see if they could incorporate the access to Skynet into hyperspace technology. It was 8 years after activating the construct when a cruiser filled with specialists and civilians went, on the System Alliance's blessing of course, to turn on a second dormant relay. 5,157 astronomical units. War returned. Codex update. Beta nerves. A special serum was released by the Systems Alliance in 4040. When injected into a person, it coated the alpha nerves and changed some of their more basic functions, making them more simple to use. The beta nerves were given free of charge to any who asked, and many did, and are agreed by most to be an improvement over the alpha nerves. As always, any offspring were naturally born with the upgraded nanotechnology. Taihao Seal. Invented back in the War of Duality by the Sanin army to combat the guns of Eden, they have since become the main personnel weapon of choice, with guns ceasing in manufacturing shortly after the war. The Taihao Seal started as a modified storage seal that released its contents one at a time. Another seal was then added on top of it to boost the released object to supersonic speeds of over 600 meters per second, since they were faster, stronger, lighter, and held many times the amount of ammo that the guns Eden used. It was no competition to which one became more popular once Sanin and Eden were allies. Shaanxi. A naturally habitable planet for humans in the Hong system. Discovered in 5156 and has since begun to slowly become inhabited. Its current population is roughly 3,000. Commissioner Hannah Shepard gave the thought to mark her agreement with the form she was currently looking at again. A sigh escaping her weary lips. With only one completed city on Shaanxi and no leader elected yet to rule, the position fell, temporarily, on the shoulders of the police commissioner. As such, she technically owned all non-private property on the planet, which was awesome. She also had to agree to every agreement to turn said land into private property. Not awesome, especially with Shaanxi being a planet that was to take the brunt of this system's immigrants. Shaanxi was already habitable by the time humans got here, a rare event. The 3 other planets and 5 moons in the system had not been terraformed yet, and the 2 halos that were scheduled to be built have not yet even begun construction. Hannah stopped working abruptly and looked up. A Skynet-wide broadcast had been issued. Hannah frowned. What in the name of Kami? A voice to her left said. While anyone could issue a Skynet-wide broadcast, that is, news that is instantly transmitted to every human using Skynet, not many ever do so. Eve was very sensitive to anything that could be regarded as spam, and everyone knows she has a short temper. If someone were to ever use Skynet for spying, crime, or pornography, especially pornography, she would change the Izanami seal and beta nerves that person possess and burn them off at nearly 500 degrees Kelvin. Not only would this forever disconnect the individual from Skynet, it would also nearly cripple the person, as they would never be able to feel anything ever again. It might even kill them. Plus, it would obviously be painful. Very painful. To date, only 4 people have ever been stupid enough to do something like that. 2 were forgiven because they were children. 1 was given off with a light warning in the form of a pain not dissimilar to if they had a particularly nasty full body rash. The 4th one Eve went all the way with and turned him catatonic. A month later he starved himself to death. On a side note, companies actually needed to go through a very long process in order to broadcast their commercials over Skynet. But back to the current predicament. Hannah watched the news flash before her eyes in a familiar way she had known for most of her life. To describe what Skynet was like to someone who has never used it would be difficult. The best way would be saying it was like having a HUD, heads-up display, inside your eyes. Hannah kept a bar along the top of her vision reserved for news so that she could constantly watch for crime and whatnot. But upon seeing the notice for a Skynet-wide broadcast, she gave a thought and enlarged the section to cover her whole vision. The semi-transparent window that now dominated her perception showed a standard Starship control panel. The image was moving, showing it was a video, and panting filled her ears as the audio to match played in her brain. "Attention everybody," the voice of a man said as the vid showed clawed hands running over the controls. "I don't have much time, but I'm part of the group of scientists that went to activate the mass relay on the Hong system." Hannah tensed as she heard that. Now she recognized the voice. "Isn't that Jiro?" The voice to her left spoke up again, unknowingly mimicking Hannah's thoughts. The scientists had stopped on Shaanxi early this morning and she had taken a liking to one of them, a charming Hanyo named Jiro. She even agreed to go out to diner with him when he got back. "We never managed to activate it." The voice continued to shout. A sudden explosion was heard and the video shuddered and crashed into the control panel with a loud thump. Hannah winced. The vid could only be recording from his eyes, so that means he just went headfirst into the metal. Jiro managed to ignore the pain and continue speaking, albeit slower. We were attacked." Hannah stiffened. "An attack? Who would attack a group of scientists and civilians? The ships. They're not human. Oh fuck." Hannah's voice was matched by the one that came from her left, though hers had noticeably more colorful language. "They have guns attached to the ships too. Yep, definitely we're not humans. Never before had a human starship been made with a weapon on it. There was no point. By the time humanity reached the stars, the Reaping War had long since passed and they've never had any major violence since. It was rumored though, that the original starship designs had something to ward off asteroids if they got too close, but that idea was scrapped because it was so ineffective. Our engines are mostly gone already. This ship was not equipped with escape pods either." The hands stopped moving over the controls that no longer worked and the vid moved up to look out the ship's window. Hannah instantly recognized what she saw as a space view of Shaanxi. "We're doomed, there's no way around that." Jiro continued, much more reserved now. "They'll probably go to Shaanxi first." He made a fist and hit the controls before giving up on them and turning. The rest of the ship's bridge was clattered with personnel moving about. 2 people lay on the metal floor, not moving. One had a visible dent in her skull. In the middle of the room, a small pedestal emitted a hologram of a person no taller than 5 inches. It was an AI. Jiro moved the AI as he continued to speak. "I'm sending Sarah here to Adam." The AI apparently heard that as she looked up sharply. "What? No, I'm staying here." The now identified Sarah yelled back. The vid moved as Jiro shook his head, but did not directly respond to the sentient computer. Sarah managed to get scans on the ships and hacked a little into their networks. "What she knows is needed if we want to save everyone that we can." The ship shook again from another explosion. "Go Sarah." Sarah gave Jiro, and by extension every other human watching, a pained look. The expression on her illuminating face made it clear that if she was physically capable of crying she no doubt would have. The AI gave a curt nod before disappearing in a flash. A tense silence passed as Jiro watched the now empty pedestal for no reason. A loud sigh escaped his lips and the vid began to blur, like it was being seen through water. He was crying. "I guess this is it. Bye mom, dad, sis, Sarah." Another volley of missiles has been shot. One of the few surviving techs yelled from across the bridge. Jiro gave a bitter laugh. "And I had a hot day tonight." There was a flash of red and a loud crash before the video and audio disappeared. Never again would any of them connect to Skynet. There was a great pause where the only thing Hannah was aware of was the tears trailing down her face. She may not have known Jiro or the crew for long, but they were good people and did not deserve such a fate. Then calls from all over Skynet came in. As police commissioner, it was unsurprising that she got so many calls from the people of Shaanxi who want help, or others that lived far away and wanted to talk to the person in charge. Suffering through the mild headache the sudden influx of calls gave her, Hannah zeroed in on an indicator that showed one particular person was calling her. Dismissing all other calls with a thought, She accepted the one labeled, Benjamin Adina, Cage of Gaia. The connection patched through. A small icon with the leader of Gaia's profile was in the top corner of her vision. It was a audio-only call. Hannah Shepard, the voice she had only heard over newsfeed before sounded from below her eardrums. Cage Sama, she responded with the appropriate title. Every planet, moon, and halo that was inhabited and possessed a government had a single ruler, a cage. Adina was the current ruler of humanity's home world and the de facto leader of the system's alliance. That he had called Hannah personally meant things were serious, not that she did not already know that. I don't think I have to tell you what's going on. The voice replied, stoic and hard as any good politician can sound. No sir. Even as they spoke, Hannah moved around her small office to gather everything she could carry and might be helpful. Good, I'm putting you in charge of protecting Shanxi. Hannah froze momentarily, but quickly returned to clearing out her office. As we speak, a dozen ships are being outfitted with weapons and 100 more are on their way to evacuate the planet, but that's not good enough against this unknown enemy. Are they? They're not the Reapers. A breath that Hannah did not know she was holding exhaled. Though they may be the Protheans, we simply don't know. Adina let out a sigh, catching Hannah was caught off guard for a second by the breaking of the serious tone. I'm not going to lie to you, Commissioner Shepard, we're in a bad situation. Never before have we had to fight in the vacuum of space, and we have no standing military anywhere. Even if we somehow build a squadron of battle-ready ships soon enough and somehow break the laws of physics to get to Shanxi before they do any serious damage, we are inexperienced in fighting in such a situation. The only thing I can give you are the scans that we got of the ships. Hannah stood in the middle of her office, gnawing on her bottom lip. Calm, Hannah? Yes? Save everyone you can. Of course, sir. I'll do my best. Let's hope that is enough. Adina out. Hannah Shepard took a minute to gather her thoughts before her head snapped up, green eyes blazing and face set in a hard visage. Who was that, Hannah? A voice from her desk asked. The commissioner turned sharply to look at the origin. Oh boy, I know that look. The AI said. His avatar was being projected in emerald light from a small hologram disc built into the table. He had the form of a young man in a shinobi uniform from Suna back before the Treaty of Unification. We have a mission to do, Rollo. She responded, holding her hand out to hologram. The AI nodded with a stern expression and disappeared in a flash that went into Hannah's hand, into her beta nerves. A small icon of Rollo's face appeared in the bottom left corner of her vision. You can review the call if you want, but first message every citizen of Shanxi. Yes, ma'am. The voice in her eardrums responded. It only took the supercomputer a microsecond to complete the task. Hannah left her office as the beep signaling the connection was formed echoed from below her eardrums. Citizens of Shanxi, this is Police Commissioner Hannah Shepard. I have just been contacted by the Cage of Gaia and placed in charge of you all until the foreseeable future. As C said this out loud, it was recorded and instantly transmitted to everyone who answered to Rollo's one-way message. The other police officers running around the hallways as she passed froze and stared at her in surprise, but quickly got back to sorting out all they could. We know very little about this enemy that we face. She analyzed the data Adina sent her on the incoming ships as she entered the elevator and went down. Rollo assisted in looking for anything he thought was useful. There are 3 ships total and they appear to have weapons capable of firing from atmosphere, though the strength of them is unknown. She stepped out of the elevator onto the first floor, the dozens of police officers saluting her, each hiding their fear very well. They were professionals. Every citizen is to retreat into the underground bunkers if they are close enough. If not, then find somewhere else to hide. Our main objective is to hold out until help arrives. She did not bother to say how far away that help was as she exited the building and entered the streets that were swarming with panicking people. No one is to attempt evacuation unless you are on the far side of the planet. They would just get shot down anyway, and on a lowly populated planet like Shanxi, in a budding system like Hong, there were very few, if any, usable spaceships anyway. Hannah looked upwards. She could not see the ships from here obviously, but they were definitely there. May the gods be with you. With a thought, she ended the broadcast. Ma'am. Hannah jumped slightly and turned to see her many loyal officers standing behind her in formation. They looked just as terrified as she felt, but they did not run. Get to the bunkers. She yelled at them, but none moved. What are you waiting for? We're not leaving, ma'am. One officer said and the 53 others nodded. She looked at them with an angry glare. Fine. Turning away she sighed as she focused on the sky again. Thanks. She breathed out just above a whisper. Accessing satellites, Rollo said in her head. Shanxi only had 5 artificial satellites, and of them only 3 were on the correct side of the planet at this time to be useful. Enemies are in orbit above the city. Hannah tensed, waiting for the shots to fired. It was her job to direct the people of this world, and to do that she had to constantly be able to see what was going on. That is why she did not hide with the civilians. A rather morbid thought crossed her mind. If Shanxi were to fall, it was still her job to save as many people, even those not on this planet, as possible. With a few choice thought commands, she started recording everything she saw and uploading the live feed to Skynet. This is Police Commissioner Hannah Shepard, she said out loud for the vid she was making. And this is the invasion of Shanxi. The Turian leading the small 3-ship fleet, Admiral Arterius, looked down on the scans curiously. There were no other ships it could detect nearby and only one city on the planet's surface. It was unlikely that this was the unknown race's home planet as it was barely colonized, but that lack of ships made a strange puzzle. He ordered a dozen rounds sent from orbit into the city to test what the response would be. When nothing happened in return for a few buildings destroyed, he and the captains of the other ships came to the conclusion that this colony world was abandoned. Most probably, it had been the first colonization attempt of the species and it failed horribly. In a desperate plea to get home, the few survivors of the doomed colony must have tried to activate the local mass relay. With what was probably their only available space-capable ship destroyed, they had no chance of leaving the planet. Admiral Arterius felt almost bad for attacking them. Almost, but they had broken the law and needed to be punished. Who knows what could have happened had they activated the relay. Seeing as orbital rounds were notoriously bad for hitting small targets, like people, and would not be able to kill every last one of them, he ordered that all foot soldiers available to get into a dropship to head towards the planet's surface. After all, if their ships was so primitive, the one they destroyed did not even use a Mass Effect core, then their ground weapons could not be anywhere near as good as the best the Turian hierarchy had to offer. Hannah winced at the fall of each building, but held her ground. She did not know if anyone was in those collapsing buildings and she did not want to find out at the moment. There was a collective gasp from her fellow officers as the ships came into view. They were small and sleek, very much unlike human ships. Thankfully, they were also very different from the giant carapace of the Reaper. Enemy drop ships touching down in the north section of the city. Rollo informed her. Hannah blinked, not believing it for a moment. Why would they do such when they could just blast away from the sky? Oh well, no point in complaining. With a thought, she reasserted the command she gave Rollo earlier and messaged every member of Shanxi. This is Commissioner Shepard, she said aloud again. Why does she have to have such a long title? It appears that the enemy has switched tactics. They have stopped orbital bombardment and are moving in ground forces. I hate to ask this, but we need every able body we can get. If anyone who's hearing this can fight, I ask you to help the police force drive them back. She disconnected the call and turned to fully face the men and women under her command. They had chosen to be police officers to stop crime, instead they were entering a war. Everyone, move out. Yes ma'am, they chanted in unison. Cammy, they're ugly. Hannah had to hold back a snort of amusement as that text sent by one of her officers scrolled by the side of her vision. She had created a link between herself, her almost 60 officers, and the 100 or so civilians who replied that they would help. Her makeshift army had quickly found the aliens that the first drop ship had let off and surrounded them without being seen. Some of her men were hidden in the shadows of alleys, others on the high roofs of the buildings. Hannah herself was on the 4th floor of a building that lined the street the aliens were currently walking down. There were about 24 of them here, the aliens that is, and the drop ship was resting not too far away. They stood in a rough circle and looked around with what she assumed was cation. They were probably disturbed that they did not run into a single person yet. The aliens, and they were pretty damn ugly, were bipedal and roughly human-shaped, but that was all they had in common with the average human. With 3 fingers and toes per limb and a reptilian, avian-like visage, they were not a pretty sight. Their suits looked bulky, though maybe that was just because their bodies were oddly shaped under them. A few wore helmets, but most seemed to prefer a type of small screen that they kept over a single eye. It could be seen on the ones without helmets that they had a crest on their head and mandibles around where their mouth probably was. What are they holding? The question in text form scrolled down her vision and Hannah did not have an answer. Each of the aliens was holding a blocky thing, keeping one end close to their face to look down the length of it while pointing the other end around threateningly as they moved down the street. They appeared to be guns. A strangely deep voice echoed in Hannah's brain through Skynet. Glancing at the icon that said who was talking, she nearly fell from her hiding space in an open window. It was actually Adam, the original AI. While they were mostly gone by the time I was created, I have seen many images on them. The ancient AI continued, either not knowing the surprise that his involvement was giving her and her people or not caring enough to remark on it. The weapons share little similarities physically to the guns of old, but the way they are holding them is remarkably similar. It took Hannah a few seconds to compose herself. Adam rarely, if ever, got involved in anything. Finally she managed to send a message in reply to the original AI, though did so silently so as not to alert the aliens on the streets below. What did these guns do? Instead of voicing a reply, Adam sent her a vid, a really old vid if the quality was anything to go by. It was forwarded to all those who volunteered to fight the aliens so that they could see too. The old video showed a blurry image of an average human holding a long stick of some sort. The human moved his hands slightly and the stick jerked up with a loud bang not dissimilar to that of a tie house seal going off. The video cut off then and Adam spoke back up. The old version fired a small metal pellet at high enough speeds to puncture skin. They were the main weapon used by Eden in the War of Duality. That sounds like a tie house seal, one of the civilians sent back. They inspired the tie house seal. Adam confirmed, try to take one of the weapons intact, I am interested in how they work. The AI cut the connection. Hannah gave a small smile. While it was kind of hidden, the fact that the greatest computer humans have ever made believed that they would fare well enough against the aliens to take one of their weapons meant a lot to her. Seeing the slight curve of the lips on the officer next to her, she knew many others saw it the same way. Running her hand over the government-issued gloves with metal knuckles and the latest tie house seal inscribed on the palm, she got on her game face, as her subordinates called it. Rollo, are there any other enemies in the area? No. The drop ships are landing all over the city. The 25 aliens you see down there are the only ones in a 500-yard radius. Good, chose a person with working tie-how gloves for each alien and marked targets. The AI acknowledged her command and one of the aliens standing in the street below lit up red in her vision. No doubt in the natural HUD of 24 others had different aliens marked similarly. Everyone with an indicator take aim. She raised her right arm and held it out straight, her palm facing the alien she had marked. She could make out a few other people doing the same, the rest must have been hidden well. When Rollo informed her that they all had taken careful aim, she sent another message. Fire. A small burst of chakra was sent to her palm, igniting the seal. The distinct bang of 25 small metal orbs re-entering the physical plane and breaking the sound barrier was incredibly loud in the tense silence. 22 of them hit their mark. None of them drew blood. What the? Someone broke the silence over their Skynet group, not that Hannah could blame him. Instead of hitting armor or flesh, the metal balls each hit a bright blue barrier that popped up around each alien the moment before contact. The aliens were surprised and disoriented for a moment before they all pointed their strange weapons on the humans they could now see as they came out of cover. Hannah managed to dive out of the open space of the window just as the rain of metal passed by where she was a moment ago. The officer who had been standing beside her was not as lucky as his head and chest was practically ripped open by the onslaught. Barriers, Rollo said through Skynet to everyone in their group. Those surviving at least. In the instant the shield's head sprang into sight, he had already fully analyzed them. Similar to those used by biotics it seems, but only activate to stop things that are coming at high velocities. Hannah cursed loudly as she pressed her back against the wall and leaned slightly to look out the window. She had to pull back sharply when one of the guns pointed at her again. What I wouldn't give for something with an exploding seal on it. Unfortunately, those were not police issue and she was rubbish at fuinjutsu. Not for the first time, she wished that jutsu and other ninja tricks were available on Skynet, but besides the very basics of things all of those fancy abilities were passed down through families. On it ma'am. Hannah blinked at the unexpected reply from 5 people in her group. She had forgotten that just cause she was bad at the art of seals does not mean everyone was. A few seconds later, she got 5 confirmations of the seals being finished. Throw them into the group. She leaned out of cover again to see 5 objects, ranging from a rusty can to an almost new shoe that someone must have been wearing just before, with hurriedly drawn seals etched on them thrown at the group of aliens who had taken cover behind the vehicles lining the street as a few humans continued to shoot at them. A moment later 4 exploded. The last one was done in such a hurry that it was a dud. The explosions badly damaged 7 of the aliens and knocked all of them off balanced. In a split second the commissioner made a decision that could make or break this battle. If high-velocity projectiles failed, then they had to use something other than tie-house seals. Everyone, move in for close-quarter combat. Not bothering to wait to see if they would follow, though she knew that they would, Hannah jumped out of the 4th-floor window, pulling a knife from her belt pouches and into each hand as she went. Her jump was perfectly executed as her feet collided with the shoulders. At least they looked like shoulders. Maybe it was different on an alien? Of one of the attackers, and they both fell to the ground. Seeing as she did not know the alien's anatomy, she went for the weakness in all species that she knew of, the eyes. Her dual knives struck forward before the alien could even catch its breath after hitting the pavement so harshly. They sunk into the dark eyes. This alien was one that did not wear a helmet and sank down up to the handle. Just for good measure, Hannah supercharged her chakra and sent a significant amount of volts through the blades. The alien twitched beneath her slightly before falling limp into a smoking mass. Definitely dead now. Yanking the knives out with a grunt, idly noticing that their blood was dark blue, Hannah launched herself at her next target. Admiral Arterius would admit only to himself that he was not paying attention to the ground battle. It was in his belief that it would be so one-sided it would be more of a massacre than a battle. And that is why he was surprised when communications with one of his ground troops patched through directly to him. "Sir, there's something wrong here." The Turian looked down at the holographic interface that showed the casualties. There were some, yes, but that was to be expected. Though they were a little high. "What do you mean? These aliens, there's something strange about them. They saw a loud snapping sound as the voice suddenly stopped. "Soldier." Nothing came through again. "Respond now." Hannah looked down at the alien whose neck she had just snapped after sneaking up behind him. She was pretty sure it was dead, so why was there an oddly small voice coming from it? Well, she assumed it was a voice. Just to be certain it was dead, she raised a foot and stomped down on the creature's torso until the metal armor and ribcage, if it had one, gave way in a spurt of blue blood. Bending down and pulling off the helmet this one wore, the little voice grew slightly louder, though it was in an odd language she had no hope of understanding. "It appears that they use a radio of sorts to communicate," Rollo said in her head. The AI had been able to scan the helmet through Hannah's eyes. Hannah could only think about how ineffective a radio would be. Unless they didn't have something like Skynet. "Rollo," she silently sent the text to the AI. If this was the way they communicated, she did not want it to hear her. "See if you can hack their systems through the radio. Learn what you can. Right away, Hannah." The icon that represented that Rollo was inside her beta nerves disappeared from her HUD and a light jumped from her hand into the helmet. She would have to hold onto the alien armor piece until Rollo came back, but that was of little consequence. Just as she was about to rush back into the battle that she could hear continuing all over the city, she noticed a civilian woman kneeling down next to the alien she just killed. "Hey, get away from that." "No," the woman said without even looking up as her hands moved over the armor, trying to find a way to take it off by the looks of it. It could still be alive. Just after Hannah retorted, the other woman managed to open up the front of the armor, revealing a large crater, about the size of her foot, go figure, in the middle of the alien's chest. The civilian gave her a deadpan look. "All right. Well, who knows what that thing can recover from?" "No one, that's why I plan to find out." At seeing Hannah's confused look, the middle-aged average human whose blonde hair was beginning to gray rolled her eyes. "I may not be a fighter, but I am a doctor. I can tell you exactly what it takes to kill these things, something I know you need." Looking back down at the corpse, her hands glowing a bright green. "Go, Commissioner, you're supposed to be fighting out there. I'm just the one who will tell you how and patch you up when it's over." When Hannah did not move, the civilian sent her one last look. Hannah did not even need to think about it. That look gave an uncomfortable reminder of when she angered her mother, before turning and running out of the alley, back into the fight. Besides, in a back alley like this, it was unlikely the civilian would be attacked. A woman ran through the hallways of an otherwise abandoned building. She looked like an average human, sans her obviously demonic teeth that all resembled sharp fangs. In her arms she held a crying baby, her baby girl to be exact. The woman had not been able to get to one of the underground bunkers in time as she was on the building roof. She turned around the corner of hallway and came to an abrupt stop with a yelp. Around the corner were 5 of the aliens that were laying siege to her city. All 5, 2 of them pointing their weapons out the window, looked up at her scream. The woman managed to dive to the side just as they pointed their weapons. Guns Adam had called them, at her. She ran back down the hall and 3 of the aliens came running in pursuit. Just as they turned the corner to the long hallway, they stopped and raised their weapons to take aim. 3 high-speed rounds collided with the woman with spurts of crimson blood. She collapsed on the ground on top of her crying baby. Hannah screamed as she was suddenly airborne and crashing into a store window. Painfully sliding over the broken glass, she hissed in pain as blood dripped from her many small wounds. An alien wreathed in dark energy, a biotic, slowly walked in after her. The cocky bastard was giving what she believed was the alien equivalent of a smirk, its gun held loosely in its talons. It flicked its free hand and Hannah was thrown against the far wall, dropping the confiscated helmet and her knives in the process. She felt cold metal press against her temple and looked up to see the alien looking down at her, putting its gun to her head. Hannah felt her hands touch something sharp and cold. The alien's finger twitched. 13 humans, 9 of which were police officers, crouched behind a line of cars that was taking heavy fire from a line of aliens. One man poked his head out from behind the cover. It would not last much longer. A bullet hit the center of his forehead. The history stories of both sides are never quite able to grasp the Battle of Shanxi. To fully understand how the battle flowed, you have to understand the humans' perspective during the whole thing. They had no idea what they were fighting or how to fight it, but that does not mean that they're hopeless. Fighting had been in the blood of humans for countless millennia. Even after the standing military was disbanded, humans fought not in wars, but among friends and family as a pleasant pastime. It became a tradition for parents to pass their fighting skills onto their children. Humans knew how to fight, they were just too scared of this unknown species to try. No one knew what it would take to kill this enemy, and that terrified them. Or at least, they did not know at first. The middle-aged blonde doctor took one last look before publishing all her findings of the autopsy to Skynet. Rollo finished going through the ocean of new information, getting all he could in the time frame he was comfortable with. It was impossible for an AI to access Skynet unless they were inside someone's beta nerves or in a specialized hologram platform. This was actually the first time in his life that Rollo had not been connected to Skynet, and he did not want to stay like that for any longer if not necessary. With a few thousand commands, taking only 4 milliseconds, the AI used the alien's strange wireless technology to transport back to the helmet he entered it through. Hannah growled in annoyance at the alien. She tried to come up with something to do to fight back, but without knowing what the alien was capable of, besides being a biotic and having those annoying shields, she could not think of anything well planned out. Just as she was about to wing it, a message on the corner of her vision drew her attention. Recognizing the profile picture of the civilian doctor and noting the name of Helen Chakwas, she accessed the file with a thought. In a shorter time frame than it took for the alien above her to decide to pull the trigger, Hannah had already found the sentence in the file that, at the moment, she felt was most important. And they lack regenerative properties. Her hand tightened on the unknown sharp object under her hand, cutting into her fingers in the process, and she swung it up with all the force she could manage. The object, a sword, flew past and neatly lopped off the 3-fingered hand holding the gun with little resistance. In the second it took for the alien to register his now amputated hand that they now both knew would not grow back, Hannah had rolled to her feet and found the next phrase in Chakwas' report that she felt was important. They are single-jointed in each limb, and the joints go roughly in the same direction as humans. Hannah maneuvered the katana she came into possession of in a way that showed her experience with such a weapon. Quickly moving to properly hold its handle, She lashed out and hit the butt of the weapon against the outside of the alien's elbow on his still intact arm. A moment later, her leg swept up and did the same with one of its knees. Both joints broke with a snap. Their diaphragm is slightly higher than that of a human's in reference to their pelvis. The report continued. She buried the fist she made around the sword's handle in the alien's diaphragm, cracking the armor and knocking the air out of its lungs. Lungs that she just read that they do have. Their esophagus is set between their spine and a layer of scales. It would take approximately 1.7 times the force to disrupt a human's breathing as it would an alien's. Her free hand came up in a palm thrust that met the alien's throat. There was a crunch of the scales breaking and a strangled gasp as its windpipe was at least bruised, probably worse. Tightening her fingers on the neck, she lifted the alien as she stood up to her full height. With her being a few inches taller than the alien, she was able to lift it a full 8 inches off the ground. They are like humans in that decapitation and puncturing the heart are definite kills. The avian-like creature opened its dark eyes weakly as blue blood dripped from its mandibles. It gave a strangled gasp before the sharp sword passed through its neck, less than an inch under Hannah's hand. The body fell while the head stayed in her grasp. The commissioner looked at the now dull eyes for a little bit before throwing it away. She did not even bother to look down and check herself as her small wounds from broken glass and the sword were already healed for the most part. For a Hanyu like her, these little injuries were only annoyances. "Hannah, are you there?" She looked sharply at the dropped helmet as the voice of Rollo came from it. The Turians looked at the downed woman, still hearing the crying of the child. They were about to turn and go back into the room they were using for a sniping post when their prey jerked to the side and jumped to her feet, moving like she had not just been shot 3 times. The crying baby was safely wrapped in a blanket and lying on the floor behind her. She made certain to stand between her little girl and the aliens. Through her anger, the woman could ignore the pain as she scrolled through the medical message. Not thinking clearly after having her baby girl nearly hurt, she only really cared to note one line in particular. Their scales also offer a natural resistance to heat and fire, but not to any great extent. With a roar that showed her vocal cords were also a demonic trait like her teeth. The Izanami seal that covered most of her body glowed brightly in tandem with the sudden influx of chakra through her body. A small fire built up in her esophagus. The rain of bullets on the line of cars temporarily stopped as a giant fiery explosion came from one of the nearby buildings, more specifically the room the aliens were getting sniping support from. In the small lull of battle, one of the humans behind the line of cars worked up enough courage to act. The civilian stood up sharply and raised his leg as his Izanami seal began to glow brightly, delivering a kick to the side off one of the cars. With his already impressive natural strength augmented with his own chakra along with the nature chakra given to him by the Izanagi seed growing inside of him, the kick was very strong. The metal vehicle, weighing just under 2 tons, dented and flew through the air like a cheap cardboard box. The aliens scattered to get away from the oncoming cover-turned projectile. Not all of them made it. A new message went around through Skynet by Rollo to the people of Shanxi, this one regarding the technology of the aliens. And there was a lot of information. One line of the message was deemed important though and sent to everyone in big bold letters. The aliens' shields will only stop objects traveling at high speeds. They will also collapse if enough strain is put on them. The 12 humans who were hiding behind the cars all read that line quickly so that by the time the aliens, Turians the new message said they were called, were about to open fire again, the 9 police officers raised both their hands, each clad in standard-issue Taihao seal gloves. "Fire!" one of them shouted. At once, all 9 of the officers poured chakra into both gloves. The hundreds of metal balls, each no bigger than a marble, broke the sound barrier nearly simultaneously, temporarily deafened everyone there. The surviving Turians' shields lasted a good 2 seconds, a rather impressive feat considering the situation. The aliens exploded in showers of blue blood shortly thereafter. Once humans knew what they were fighting, they saw no reason to fear it. These Turians were not, as many feared them to be, as dangerous and indestructible as the Reaper from many millennia ago that to this day was used in stories to scare children into obedience. These were not like the Reaper, they were nowhere near as powerful. Turians could be fought on more or less even footing. They could be killed. And when 99.9% of humans in the galaxy had an inborn love for violence, the ability to bend nature to their will, and years of practice with spars often done between friends and family, nothing weaker than a Reaper stood much of a chance against them. Explosions rocked the city as fighter ships flew over. Hannah scowled at the alien crafts flying above. They must have been pretty certain of their aerial abilities if they risked flying so close to the skyscrapers. Her eyes widened and a smirk formed across her lips. With a quick message around the group to tell them her plan and an almost instantaneous calculation by Rollo, who was back in her beta nerves, to find the optimal timing, she sprinted directly at the nearest building. At the last moment before she collided with the structure, she jumped off the ground and pressed her foot against the vertical glass and metal. Then the other foot followed. Soon enough she was running straight up the building. It mattered little to any human who saw her casually defy gravity, but more than a few Turians stared when they should have been shooting. Just within her limited range of vision she could make out 5 of her followers doing the same after getting her message. She scaled the metal structure and reached the ledge of the roof within the minute. Not pausing, she planted her feet on the ledge and pushed off with all she had. It was perfectly executed. Just as Hannah reached the apex of her jump, one of the fighter ships collided with her, surprising the pilot as she seemed to have come out of nowhere. The commissioner groaned at the impact. If she did not stay still for a minute or so to let them heal, the damaged blood vessels beneath her skin would form a wonderful bruise over most of her body. She had to brush off the brief pain as the ship went into a barrel roll, the pilot's attempt to shake her off. It did little good as Hannah's hands and feet stuck to the machine like glue. She gave a grunt of annoyance and let go of the ship with one hand, grabbing the sword she found earlier. It had proven to be very helpful and she had slid it into her belt for her daring climb. Pulling it free and moving to hold it in reverse grip above her head, she lit it up with lightning affinity chakra and plunged it down. The glass that separated her from the alien, specially designed to be able to deal with atmospheric re-entry, was punctured easily by the piercing power of the electrically augmented blade. Dragging the blade to the side, she released her chakra hold on the craft and got caught by the wind, dragging her back along the ship with her sword cutting a deep groove in the metal. Accidentally, she hit the power core of the ship. The element Zero reacted to the electrifying puncture and did the one thing it was famous for to humans. Boom! Hannah was thrown abruptly to the side at the blast of blue radiation. Hannah, she heard as she fell, blinded and burned from the explosion. She managed to make out the roof in her blurry, swirling vision before she collided with it. A Turian ship touched down unknowingly on the same roof not 5 minutes later. This battle was not going as expected for the avian species. These strange aliens just seemed to never stay down, and the things they were doing should not be possible. One of the disembarking Turians spotted a charred corpse not too far away, one that was decidedly not of his own species. Figuring that it would be a good idea to take it back so that their doctors could find out more, he moved to pick it up by the scraps of cloth that were still attached to it. Unfortunately, he did not know, however, that even an average human would have been able to sufficiently heal from a fall and burns that were actually not as bad as they appeared. Like that in around 12 minutes. Nah, Han. He also did not know that Hanyo's healed even faster than that. Quote. Hannah. Green eyes snapped open and her arm blurred. A delicate-looking fist smashed into the Turian's knee, snapping it backwards. His cry of pain was cut short as a sword that somehow managed to stay in her grasp during the explosion and resulting skydive darted out and stabbed him between the eyes as he buckled forward. The other Turians moving out of the ship turned at the cry of pain. They fired at the burned woman, who grabbed the armor collar of the Turian she just killed and held him up as a meat shield. After a few seconds of gunfire, a plan was formed and she threw the corpse at the Turians attacking her and rolled to the side. Just as she came out of the roll she flicked her wrist. The sword was once again coated in lightning and thrown with expert precision, soon finding itself in the chest cavity of one of the avian creatures. The lightning covering the blade was then released, blowing the Turian's chest open like a punctured water balloon, before arcing to strike the nearest conductors it could find. 4 more Turians were violently electrocuted and collapsed, though whether they were dead or unconscious she did not know. Hannah raised her arms, firing a long string of metal orbs from the tie-house seal on her right glove. The glove on her left hand was rendered useless from the explosion. The shots rang against a Turian's shields that collapsed soon enough, the next few rounds reducing its head to goo. Bullets met the flesh of her shoulder and she rolled away before more than two could properly connect. Spying the final alien on the roof, she sprang forward, ignoring the sudden sharp pain in her leg. The crown of her head collided with the Turian's chest plate with enough force to crack it and throw him over the edge of the building. The alien screamed as it fell to its death. Panting, Hannah fell on her ass. Messages were being sent from anyone on Shanxi who was still alive and not hidden away. They varied in wording, but all meant the same thing. They're retreating, Rollo said in her head, the smile easily heard in his tone. You did it, Hannah. She gave a laugh. Good, that's real good. Falling from her crouched position to lie on her back, she stared up at the blue sky with a smile as dozens of alien ships flew away. Her eyes widened and she jerked back to a sitting position. With a thought, she sent another message to every citizen of Shanxi. Everyone, get to the bunkers. Now, Hannah? Rollo asked, confused by the panic in her voice no doubt. He was ignored by the frantic woman. I repeat, get to the bunkers. With their forces leaving they can continue orbital bombardment. Rollo gasped from within her mind. Hannah tried to stand so that she could run as well but fell back down with a cry of pain. Looking down, she saw that there was a large, deep gash down her thigh oozing so much blood she could see it pulsing. It would heal in a few minutes if she remained still, but... Incoming projectiles. The AI in her head shouted. She might not survive a few minutes. The Turian leading the fleet gave a cry of anger, breaking the standard cold persona he was supposed to hold. When the casualties raised from acceptable to on the high side, he began to worry. When they sharply rose again to highly improbable, he thought it was a computer malfunction, as had been known to happen, rarely. When the casualties rose to that of a slaughter and soldiers were calling in screaming about monsters and magic, he ordered a retreat. Whatever these things were, if they could not be beat on the ground, then so be it. All surviving soldiers are off the surface. One of surrounding techs yelled. I want all guns aimed at that city. He barked back immediately. When he got the confirmation that his order had been filled out, he gave the Turian equivalent of a grimace. Burn it to the ground. Yes, sir. As Hannah's world turned to fire and she knew it was over. The deafening, blinding explosion was the preface to her death, she knew that. The reason she was crying was not that though, it was because she had failed to protect everybody. Shanxi was dead. When she heard the second explosion, she figured that they were just shooting everywhere at random and had failed to hit the building she was on yet. When she heard the third, she thought they were starting on the other side of the city. When she heard the 10th and still no flames reached her skin, she grew confused. She cleared her eyes of moisture and looked up just in time for the 11th explosion. Way above in sky. Her own confusion was matched by that of hundreds of others which was circling through Skynet. The orbital rounds were detonating at least 3 miles above the city, way too far away to be of any danger. I missed most of the action then? That's too bad. It took Hannah a moment to realize that the voice, the strange, masculine voice that did funny things with her stomach, did not come over Skynet but from right next to her, and that the roof that previously held only her and corpses now had another living individual. With a jerk, Hannah scooted away from the voice, preparing to be attacked, though she had no idea why, as the person obviously spoke her language. She stopped though when she caught sight of the new person's face. Her mouth fell open and eyes widened. Holy crap! Rollo, who could only look through her eyes, shouted in surprise. The AI never cursed, but this was warded. The man was a human, though not like any she had ever seen in person. He had no markings of an Izanami seal and his facial features looked slightly off. Despite that, she instantly knew who he was. If the famous spiky blonde hair did not give it away, then the signature whisker-like marks would have. Nah. Hannah could only become a stuttering mess as she stared up at the face that was more often than not found in history and children's stories. She did not know that he ever left Sado, let alone Gaia. Naruto Uzumaki looked down at her with the brightest blue eyes she has ever seen. The moment their eyes met, Hannah felt her blood freeze from the intensity of the look. He blinked once before looking away. Am I to assume that you're Hannah Shepard? Hannah could only blink stupidly. The little part of herself that still acted like a child was jumping for joy that the man who was literally the idol of every human in the galaxy knew her name, while most of her was shivering from the fear she felt when he looked at her. She was brought back to reality when another explosion rocked her eardrums. Her head snapped up, only to find that the bombardment was still being stopped by an unknown force. She looked back at the blonde legend with wide eyes. Are you? She lost the ability to speak when his eyes went back to her. Am I what? Sweet Cammy, does his voice have to sound like that? Unable to answer, Hannah jerked her head upward just as another explosion went off in the air. His gaze traveled upwards and away from her, much to Hannah's relief. Ah, yes, that's me. He looked back at her, stealing her breath again. So, I ask again, are you Hannah Shepherd? He repeated. Unable to answer with her soul feeling like it was being frozen, she could only jerkily nod. Naruto looked away, back to Sky. Good. Now, how to deal with this situation? He spoke aloud, probably to himself. I don't suppose you have some way to properly talk to them? This question was obviously directed at Hannah. Internally happy that he did not look back at her with that unnerving gaze, the commissioner managed to answer. I'm sorry, but Rollo was unable to grasp their language enough to translate to it. Rollo? His voice, oh, that voice, showed his confusion. In AI, he made a noise of understanding. Too bad. Maybe I can shunch into their ship and try and work something out directly. He was talking to himself again, but Hannah was able to hear him clearly over the explosions. Her eyes widened even further. Shun from planet side to a spaceship? No one can do that. Well, I don't think that anyone can do that. Before her disbelief could go any farther, she received a notice that someone was calling her. For a moment she thought about dismissing it, but it was from an old friend who she hadn't talked to in a while. Seeing that, she accepted. Hannah, glad that you picked up. The familiar voice sounded in her head. This had better be important, Ken. Naruto glanced at her curiously. She made certain to avoid eye contact so that she could retain the ability to speak properly. I'd like to think that me being stuck on an alien ship would be important. Hannah gasped. I was knocked out and apparently taken prisoner. Don't worry, we'll get you out of there. She shouted back. Don't bother. Hannah could only gape when she heard that. I got a pretty nasty scratch and I don't think it'll heal soon enough for me to survive. We have doctors. Too far away. Her anger and fear boiling over, she snapped at her friend. Why were you even on Shanxi? I thought you were living with your family. I was. The air in her throat caught and nearly choked her. Are they? No, I just contacted them before you. Both Martha and the girls are alive. Hannah let out a relieved sigh. But I know I won't be able to see them again. I just wanted to say goodbye. I'll be landing on the main ship, or at least one of them soon. Ken. The call cut out. Ken. Ken Williams grunted as the dropship he was dragged into touched down, rather harshly. The alien that was flying it came towards him then, waving its gun threateningly. He was very badly injured. His left arm below his elbow had been smashed by a section of a building that fell on it. A deep gash diagonally ran down his chest and he did not even remember how he got it, and his tail that marked him as a Hanyo was broken in 5 places. Still, he managed to kill the alien with some effort. Unfortunately, it was a loud process and attracted many others. As the Turians tried to come aboard the ship he was on, Ken clumsily fired a burst with the bizarre weapon, a gun, he confiscated from the still cooling corpse. He tried to concentrate through the pain to make a mental connection to an ally, though not via Skynet. Can you hear me? He sent his thoughts through a connection that forms when a person uses the ancient technique of becoming an ally with an animal through what is called a summoning contract. I can. The response from very far away came almost immediately. What is it you need of me now? He sounded angry, but he always did anyway. I'm dying. As if to articulate the point, he spit out the blood that was gathering in his mouth. As a last wish, I need you to save my family. There was a pause. I can do this. Good. Ken sent another volley of bullets at a Turian, but the gun stopping working with an unpleasant choking-like sound. Seeing as it seemed to be broken now, he threw it away and concentrated. To summon his ally over such a great distance would be difficult. Not impossible, but it would use up the rest of his chakra. He would also need quite a bit of blood. He screamed in pain as his hand dug into the wound on his chest, blood pooling beneath him. The next Turian that came around the corner was so surprised at seeing this that it did not shoot Ken, instead calling over its allies. Ken Williams ignored this and continued to gather the chakra necessary. In truth, the Turians were not the first alien race humans encountered. Ignoring the Reaper, That was believed to be from space, though never proven. They had met to this day 5 other species. The difference now was that Turians were the first species they've met that had anything resembling technology, or even a half-decent understanding of mathematics. Ken was one of those who had discovered one of the 5 alien species, years before he met his now-wife Martha when he was a young adventurer of the stars. He had found the species while exploring the planet of Acus. He ignored the Turians hovering around him as he sat in a pool of his own blood. They probably thought he was dead with how still he was. In truth, it was easier to gather the natural chakra given off by the Izanagi seed inside of him if he was not moving. The aliens were so surprised when his one intact arm suddenly moved and slammed onto the ground covered in his blood that they could not stop it, not that they had any particular reason to. Sucks for them. They had only a second to contemplate the thick black lines that spider-webbed out in all directions from the human's hand before their lives abruptly ended. Admiral Arterius scowled at the news that the prisoner they had down in the docking bay had killed itself. Could this day possibly get any worse? A sudden cry of alarm over the comms was the last thing he heard. The biggest of the 3 Turian ships, a dreadnought, broke apart. The roars of those responsible were lost in the vacuum of space, but they were there. Not 1, nor 2, but 3 fully grown thresher maws erupted from the ship, tearing it apart with ease. One of the massive carnivorous worms managed to make it to a second, smaller ship. The great maw that it was known for tore into the metal in just the right place to compromise the element zero core. With a blue flash, the ship violently evaporated as well. The 3 great worms vanished before they could be seriously hurt by the explosion or lack of air, leaving behind 2 destroyed ships and hundreds of dead Turians. Had there been air, the worms would have come and gone in a large cloud of smoke. The captain of 3rd and last Turian ship in the system could only gape at the wreckage. What just happened? Thresher maws in space? The only conclusion he could come to was that this was caused by the screwed-up new species they found, and that was not a comforting thought. Once he metaphorically regained the eyes that fell out of his head and picked his mandibles up off the floor, the captain ordered a full retreat. Of the 4,500 Turians that came into this system, only 300 left. Back on Shaanxi, a woman cried as Dr. Chakwas removed the 3 bullets from her back. Her youngest daughter was in her arms and asleep while her oldest sat beside her, crying as well. The Williams family would forever be without a husband and father. The first contact war began and ended within a day. The human casualties at 476, including the science team that was shot down before the battle reached Shaanxi. Ken Williams was given the title of Sanin, something only given to great war heroes, post-mortem. He was the first to receive the title since the Reaping War. By morning the next day, 20 starships retrofitted with new and untested space weapons orbited Shaanxi, with more and more moving in. They made certain to not move all of their forces to one area in case they were attacked in a completely different system. The Systems Alliance decided to reinstate a standing military, and volunteers were of no shortage with the vid created by Hannah Shepard being widespread. However, it would take some time before a proper chain of command, supplies, and other things needed could be formed and gathered. In the meantime, all citizens were temporarily removed from Shaanxi and evacuated to the nearest colonized system. Many were expecting the battle to continue, but it did not. Codex Update. Psi, Ship Control Interface. As with all things made by humans, starships work with a combination of technology and fuinjutsu. The SCI has been the method of controlling and maneuvering starships since the original lunar landing. The modern Psi is much more advanced, and has since then spread to be used in common vehicles such as cars, boats, and trains. It is an intricate and confusing web of black lines that make up the seal to control the vehicles, but how to work it is common knowledge, like riding a bike or walking up a tree. But just because you know how to work it does not mean you're good at it. Skynet Node. Skynet does not directly connect one human to another. Rather, it connects both of them to Eve, with which they can exchange information through. If a ship is traversing hyperspace, all humans on it cannot connect to Eve and, by extension, each other. To relieve at least some of the stress, all ships are built with a node that allows all humans on it to remain connected to each other during hyperspace. They cannot contact those outside of the ship, nor can they access the large bank of knowledge, but it is still much preferred to the otherwise silence. Hannah Shepard sat on the bed in the room she was given aboard the SSV Kamatachi, one of many ships that were now orbiting the abandoned planet of Shanxi. A few hours after the only surviving Turian ship retreated, the first of the human ships began to arrive. Hannah chose to stay with the growing fleet instead of leaving for another colony. If the Turians came back, she wanted to fight them, damn it. It was not long ago that the adrenaline wore off and Hannah collapsed on her bed. Pain from slowly healing injuries and strained muscles was the least of what was worrying her. Because now she could not forget their faces. At the time, she was high on the blood rapidly pumping through her heart and they did not register. Now though, nothing was stopping the images she had in her head from coming forth. Images of death, blood, and fear. She had watched the vid she recorded and could not even remember half the things it showed her doing. When did she wade through that flaming wreckage? When had she passed those crying families? When had she ignored those bloodied corpses? Why did she not save that person when she could have? People were calling her a hero, but after watching this, how could they? She was supposed to protect everyone, but so many people died. She was no hero. A knock on her door temporarily relieved her of her thoughts. "What do you want?" she called out in a hoarse voice. "So you are alive." Well, she knew who it was now with how that voice sent her stomach into a series of backflips. "Can I come in?" Hannah thought it over before looking to the corner desk where Rollo's avatar was being projected, the AI looking at her sadly. She nodded at her friend and the door slid open. Naruto was dressed the same as he was when he first appeared next to her, black pants, orange shirt, and deep maroon coat. He still did not have shoes, which confused her, not that she would ask. The blonde legend took one look at her, his eyes thankfully no longer chilling her heart, and gave a sad smile that did the exact opposite. "First time on the battlefield?" She looked up at him sharply and he gave a small chuckle that made her lightheaded. "Don't look so surprised. Ignoring the fact that there hasn't been anything resembling a war since I blew up that purple lobster, I would know that look anywhere." Hannah had to stifle a laugh. She'd never heard anyone talk about the Reaper so casually before, or call her a lobster. "Oh, but don't tell Gyuki I said that. He likes to think he was the one to put most of the power behind the blast." This time she did laugh. Naruto only nodded. "Feeling better now?" Calming down, the commissioner of an empty city felt as if the world had been lifted off of her shoulders. "Yeah, much better. Thank you." Naruto gave another smile that did funny things to her breathing. "Why are you talking to me so much? And how did you know my name before?" It had been bothering her for a while. Even joking with him like this, Naruto still seemed like a larger-than-life figure. Why would he care about little old Hannah? Okay, maybe old was a bad thing to be said in comparison to him, but you get the point. The legend shrugged. "The only reason I even heard about the attack in the first place was because Ben told me. He asked me to watch out for you as well." Hannah blinked. There are a lot of Bens out there. She was friends with half a dozen or so. A thoughtful look passed over Naruto's face. "I think he's the leader of Gaia now, or did her already retire?" Her eyes bulged out. "You mean Benjamin Adina? The Cage of Gaia asked you to watch out for me? So he is still the leader." Naruto seemed pleased to have that confirmed. "I ran into him when he was a kid. He kept jumping around and asking for my autograph." Hearing the word he muttered to himself, Hannah was beginning to wonder if he was BCing her. That strict old guy she sees in vids of big political conferences jumping around like that. That would never happen. Anyway, he managed to contact me through this old machine I have on Sado and told me about you and what's going on. "So you were on Sado?" Rollo exclaimed loudly, drawing attention to his hologram in the corner of the room. It were physically possible, the AI probably would have blushed in embarrassment. As it were, he awkwardly coughed into his fist. "All right. Well, how did you get to Shanxi so quickly?" His desperate attempt to get their attention away from himself worked. Naruto just shrugged and looked back at Hannah. "I asked Eve to modify the seal of someone on Shanxi so that I could teleport to it. She just so happened to choose you." Hannah gaped at him, again. She knew he could teleport, the Hiraishin Jutsu was one of the things he was most famous for. But the distance between Shanxi and Gaia was so great, there's no way he could do that. Right? Footsteps drew the three's attention to the door as a young man stepped in. He jerked to stop when he saw Naruto, an understandable reaction. He stuttered for a few seconds before finally managing to speak in the presence of the living god. "SSS sir." He jerkily turned to Hannah. "Ma'am." The captain wishes for your presence on the bridge. Having delivered his message, the young man gave one last stunned look at Naruto before leaving. Hana just hoped she did not look that ridiculous when she first saw Naruto. Internally, she knew that she did. Walking through the halls of the Kamitachi was an interesting experience for Hana. Everyone they passed would stop whatever they were doing to stare at Naruto as they walked past. The blonde seemed to ignore all of it, but Hana decided she felt very uncomfortable. When they reached the bridge and met the captain, one David Anderson, Hana was met with a very solid frown from the dark-skinned man. "Commissioner Shepard, I would appreciate it if you stopped dismissing all messages sent to you." Hana blinked, then nearly slapped herself when she remembered that she set her HUD to automatically dismiss any call sent to her, as she did not want to talk with anyone while she was in a depressed funk. So that's why he sent an actual person to get me. With the thought, she dropped the blockade, wincing at the headache that came with the sudden influx of messages from friends and family, along with a few from unwanted fans. "Sorry Captain, it won't happen again." Anderson nodded, before looking at Naruto and nodding to him as well. "A pleasure to meet you, sir." "Likewise, Captain." Naruto nodded in turn. "What do you need us here for?" "There's an alien ship." Out of the corner of her eyes, Hana saw Naruto's visage harden into what it was on the roof on Shanxi. She was pleased to note that Anderson gave a slight shiver under his gaze as well, meaning that it was not just her who was scared by it. The captain was quick to break eye contact and look back out the large window of the bridge. Hana could just barely make out ship against the black of space. "It has stopped within the reach of our weapons, but our AI scans show they have none of their own." Anderson continued. Unspoken was the caution with using said weapons of the Kamitachi. They were untested. Maybe they would work, maybe they would not. It was a 50-50 chance. "What are they doing then?" Hana asked, only to get a shrug from the captain. "What are we going to do then?" He shrugged again. "It could be a distraction, maybe a trap, I don't know." "It's none of those things." They both turned back to Naruto, and were glad to find that his scary look was gone. A distraction would have attacked to draw our attention, and a trap would have used the wreckage of our own ship or something more tantalizing. He gave a small smile. "This is a peace offering." Matriarch Benezia would not have been able to keep the scowl off her face if she wanted to, as she sent her simple message for what felt like the 100th time. This new species that the council had ordered her to negotiate a peace with over what the Turians did were not what she expected. The surviving Turians from the unneeded assault said, after some rubbish about terrible monsters with magical powers, that they had no space-worthy ships left in the system. Benezia had fully prepared to enter the planet's atmosphere, but was instead met by a blockade of over 50 large, odd-looking, blocky ships. Ships with weapons. Still, she did not back down. She had confidence in her negotiating skills and, if worse came to worse, her pilot skills behind the wheel. The good news was that they were not firing at her. The bad news was that they were not returning her requests for communication. "Can we leave now? All these ships are making me nervous." Her pilot, another Asari by the name of Taylor Vassar, complained, as she had been doing since they got there. Though it was understandable, as all the weapons she could see with her naked eye were trained on their small vessel. "No. If we do not stop them, they could strike back at the Turians. Who knows where it will go from there? Let them beat up the idiots." Taylor responded hotly. "They deserve it, I just don't want to get in the way." Benezia said nothing, though she agreed that the Turians were idiots for doing what they did, and was about to send her invitation again. "Damn, they're doing something now." Taylor gripped the wheel tighter, ready to swerve away if need be. Benezia looked out the front window of the small shuttle she procured to see a hatch on the side of the largest ship there open. She also tensed, waiting for a fighter ship to fly out, or a railgun to present itself. But nothing happened. The large opening in the ship just sat there, quiet, waiting, inviting. "That room is plenty big enough for this shuttle to fit into." Benezia hedged. Taylor instantly caught on. "No, no, no. No, 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 no. No, I am not going in there." Benezia put a comforting hand on the younger Asari's shoulder. "I know you want to become a Spectre, Taylor, and brokering peace with a new race is exactly what you need." Taylor worried her lip, looking indecisive. "I'll even write you a recommendation myself." A matriarch as important as herself recommending an Asari was basically a guarantee that she would get into the program, and they both knew it. "Fine." Taylor huffed in frustration and pressed the shuttle forward. The small craft expertly maneuvered into the offered opening and sat down on the metal floor. Apparently they had artificial gravity technology, which was good. Though how they managed that while supposedly not possessing a Mass Effect core, Venezia had no idea. Though they could not see it from the front window of the shuttle, it was obvious when the hangar door closed as air began to pump into the room. "Looks like it's breathable," a still tense Taylor said after a few seconds, looking at the readout on the consoles. "But they could still vent the room at any moment. I don't think they'll do that." Venezia gave a small smile as she saw doors open around the hangar and bipedal creatures stared moving in. It did not appear that any were wearing pressurized suits to survive a sudden venting. "Looks like this is my chance." Not wanting to hear the rebuke Taylor would not doubt give, Venezia pressed the button on the wall to open the shuttle door. Stepping out, she got her first unobscured view of this new race, and there were a lot of them to look at. She counted maybe 50 of them in the room, all of them on a catwalk that bordered the top of the room. In any other similar situation, Venezia would not have been too worried as she saw no guns on them and had faith in her biotic abilities, but if these were the species that utterly destroyed the Turians. Just as she was about to try communicating, two of the aliens started to make their way down a stairway. By the time Taylor was out of the shuttle and standing behind her, the two creatures were standing side by side at a reasonable speaking distance. "What do we do now, mistress?" A nervous Taylor asked behind her, causing the darker-skinned alien to shift its gaze to her while the lighter-skinned, shorter one kept up the staring contest with Venezia. "We cannot speak their language." Venezia had no answer. Every other time they had encountered a new species they had linked to their computers to understand their language and uploaded to the translators built into Omni tools. The only exception to date were the Krogan, who had no technology to speak of. But these aliens were not like the Krogan. They had managed both space travel and artificial gravity on their own, so they must have at least moderately advanced computers somewhere. The problem was to getting to them without being able to communicate. Instead of answering, Venezia decided to observe these strange new creatures as they no doubt were doing to her. The two standing in front of her were so different from one another that she almost assumed they were two completely different species. But upon looking around the room, she saw various combinations of their qualities and hypothesized that their species just had an astoundingly large amount of diversity. They were both slightly taller than the average Turian but below that of a Krogan. They were bipedal with forward-facing knees and 5 fingers on each hand. The one on the left had an incredibly similar body shape to an Asari while the one on the right did not. If they were anything like the Quarians, that meant the taller one was male and the shorter one female. They also shared a single pair of eyes, tribal markings over their exposed skin like Turians and Asari do, and had hair. Obviously they were mammals, as well as the first intelligent species in the known galaxy that grew hair. Some rumored that the Quarians had hair beneath their suits, which Venezia knew was false, and others said the same about the Volus, and even she did not know if that was true. The one on the left, the male, had a dark-toned skin. His hair was cut very short, almost making it look like he had none to begin with. The black lines of his tribal tattoo stood out on his skin, only seen on his neck, head, and hands as the rest was covered by clothing. As far as Venezia could tell, their eyes followed a pattern of white on the outside, followed by another color, then a black pupil. Another similarity to the Asari. The middle ring of the tall male's eyes were a muddy brown. The one on the right, the female, was a little more than an inch shorter than her companion, but still taller than almost everyone Venezia had ever met, sans any Krogan. She had bright red hair growing out of the top of her head that stopped just above her chin and bright green eyes. She showed more skin than the male in that the sleeves of her top stopped halfway to her elbow. With the smooth milk-like skin exposed, Venezia could see her black markings swirling around her arms in many intricate patterns. Venezia blinked though when she noticed a significant difference between the two aliens. The female of the two had a tail. Maybe it was a difference between the S? Unknown to the two Asari, with one analyzing the new race and the other fidgeting nervously under all the silent gazes. Rollo had accessed their shuttle's computer. It was not very difficult for the AI to do so, as the shuttle had a communication receiver so that it could connect with other ships and such, though it was an unheard of concept for humans. In the time it took for Venezia to assess the two humans, Rollo had easily wirelessly hacked into the shuttle from Hannah, accessed its small computer bank it possessed, and downloaded everything it could to Hannah's beta nerves. Among the information Rollo gathered was a basic understanding of some language, and upon hearing the scared-looking, younger blue alien speak he knew it was the language they spoke. It was only a basic understanding though, and had many holes in the translation. But with Rollo connected to Skynet and by extension Atom, the AI who was able to work out communicating with freaking Thresher Maz, they were able to fill in the blanks within the minute. Matriarch Benezia and Taylor actually jumped when the female of the two suddenly spoke up. "You are not Turian." It was a simple statement, one that the younger Asari actually felt insulted by the idea that they would ever confuse her with one of those damn birds. But neither of the two blue biotics could answer right away over the fact that she had spoken in Asari. Granted, the accent was so bad it was almost unintelligible and she stressed the wrong syllables, but the words themselves were perfect. For a brief second, Benezia entertained the idea that their natural language was nearly identical to her own, but brushed it aside as foolish. No, Benezia was actually very pleased that she did not stutter. "We are Asari." Though that added another question to the growing list: how did they even know the Turians were called Turians? They could have tortured it out of a captive possibly, but how would they have understood what it said? And wouldn't the captive have mentioned Asari or other races at some point? "What may I call you?" she asked politely. "As a species we are called humans," the human female said. It was an easy enough name to remember. "Personally, I am Commissioner Hannah Shepard." Little bit more challenging, but still memorized by the matriarch easily enough. "This is Captain David Anderson." She tilted her head to the dark-skinned human next to her, who was looking at Benezia with an expression that, if humans were similar to Asari in that was as well, was thoughtful. "We are on his ship, SSV Kamatachi." She gave the Asari a small nod. "What are your names?" "I am Matriarch Benezia and this is Taylor Vassar." She introduced the two as Taylor still looked nervously around the room and did not seem like she wanted to talk. "And what do you want with us, Matriarch?" The dark-skinned captain suddenly spoke up. Benezia hid her surprise well. How did he know her native tongue as well? While the man looked and sounded intimidating, his tone, even in a language not his own, was strict as any captain's should be. "I wish to apologize on behalf of the Turian hierarchy." Most of the humans around the room tensed, causing Taylor to shift a hand to her gun. Only Benezia and Anderson remained calm. "They are you allies then?" the captain asked, and Benezia noted that his accent and stresses were getting better. "Weird." Benezia nodded. "We are." The humans around the room began to shift low into crouches and the one called Shepard in particular slowly pull on a pair of fingerless gloves, followed by grabbing the hilts of two knives on her belt. They still use knives even after they achieve space travel? Very weird indeed. It was while Shepard was shifting that Benezia noted the ring of dark red fur around her collar that she had assumed was part of her clothes was not. She actually had hair, or fur rather, growing out the base of her neck. She supposed she should have seen that coming as it matched the color of her tail fur exactly. A quick glance around the room revealed that some of the humans had tails and others patches of fur, but not all of them were female like she suspected they would be. Very, very weird. Deciding it would be best to defuse the situation as soon as possible, Benezia pushed her confused thoughts away and continued to speak. Both the Asari and Turians are part of the Council of Species that has ruled this galaxy for over 2.5 millennia. She saw the surprise blossom on their faces. Currently there are 10 species that are ruled by the Council, though 3 of them have been separated for some time now. No one was really certain if the Batarians, Quarians, or Krogans would ever be allowed back, and only time would tell. One of the laws that has been in place by the Council for almost 2,000 years states that no new mass relays can be activated. This is because the opening of one relay long ago led to a 300-year-long bloody war that billions perished in. From the resigned scowl on the captain's face, she knew he understood. The Turians probably acted out of fear at seeing you attempting to activate the relay and opened fire. Whatever reason the admiral of the fleet had for attacking the planet, I cannot say, as his ship did not survive the battle. Shepard had an odd reaction and gave what looked like an amused yet sad smile. "I see," Anderson said, giving a thoughtful frown. Benezia let that sink in, relieved to note that Shepard had released her knives, though she knew she could easily fight her off had she drawn them. "I am also here to offer you to join the council, that is," Seeing their surprised looks, she explained, "It is customary to offer the chance to any new species, even if they had a rough start with one of the council species." "And what do the Turians say about this?" Anderson asked, his face giving nothing away to whether he wanted peace or the chance to kill all of the avian species. "They came to an understanding that it was they who instigated the attack, eventually." Behind her, Taylor snorted. "A little advice." The younger Asari spoke up, apparently no longer as nervous as she was before. "The Turians are the main military branch. They're still unhappy that you guys beat them back, and they'll stay that way for a while." Benezia scowled at her tone. It was no secret that Taylor held no love for Turians. A snort very similar to Tila's came from Shepard. "And we'll hate them for murdering a bunch of civilians for as long as we remember. And unfortunately for them, humans have long memories." Both Benezia and Anderson ignored their accomplices who were now smirking at one another in mutual amusement. "If you could show us the location of where to meet this council, we can move out," Anderson said, causing Benezia to give a small frown for two reasons. The first was that she was hoping to take her shuttle to the Citadel. If humans did not possess Mass Effect technology, it would take forever to get to the nearest active relay. "Don't you need to contact your superiors first?" And that was the second reason. The council would need to speak with the main government, not a random captain and his crew. For them to want to leave immediately confused Benezia. Anderson just gave a small smile at the question while Shepard smirked. Unknowingly, Benezia had just confirmed the suspicions of all the members of the Systems Alliance who were watching through the captain's eyes that these aliens did not possess anything quite like Skynet. "They're already informed and have agreed to listen to the council," was Hannah's mysterious reply. "No use in telling possible enemies about what humans could do if it could be avoided. Once they could be trusted more, they could know. But until then, she would keep her knives and sword on her person at all times." Benezia's frown deepened. Fine, if they wanted to play like then so be it. Besides, as soon as they found where the Citadel was, they would probably admit it was too far away for them and agree to board her shuttle. "Very well, do you have a navigation room?" Anderson nodded and walked away, followed by Shepard. Benezia gave a nod to Taylor as the younger Asari closed the shuttle door and they both followed the humans. Walking through the alien ship was an interesting experience. Despite having no expertise with designing starships, Benezia could easily tell that no, they did not possess Mass Effect technology. She had originally thought that they might if they found some renovating way to deal with the heat exhaust on such a large ship. But walking through said ship, she found it lacked many things every other ship she had ever been on had. The hallways were too big and awkwardly supported that they would collapse if forced through FTL travel. The circuits of electricity were distributed so incredibly wrong that they could not all lead to one source of power. Most meaningful though, was that there was no telltale hum of an Element 0 core. After walking up 4 sets of stairs and down a long corridor, they reached what was definitely the navigation room, if the large hologram of the galaxy was anything to go by. Benezia let out a relieved sigh. They had holograms, at least they were not too technologically backwards. At a gesture from the captain, she moved up to the hologram and jabbed at the exact area of the Citadel, pleased that the projection sensed her action and lit up the area with a dot. Anderson came up beside and gave the dot a thoughtful look. "The Serpent Nebula," he said to himself. Just when Benezia was certain he was going to ask for a ride in her shuttle that did have a Mass Effect core, albeit a small one, he surprised her by nodding. "Very well, it will be done." The room that was a moment ago was empty save for the 2 humans and 2 Asari burst into action. Almost before Benezia knew what was going on, she was surrounded by dozens of humans moving to sit in the chairs around the edge of the room she now realized was actually the bridge. Anderson and Shepard moved away from the hologram towards the far side of the room. It took Benezia a few seconds to regain from her surprise and follow. It took Taylor even longer. Catching up to the captain and commissioner, she was about to go into a rant. No, not a rant. Matriarchs don't rant. She was going to debate, to try and convince them to just take her shuttle because it would take far too long for this ship to make the journey when she was stopped by the side of the next room. It was obviously the cockpit, and the human in the only chair was obviously the pilot. What surprised her was the controls the pilot was using. The whole dashboard was a metal plate that made a U around the pilot's chair head. It had no levers, no buttons, not even a wheel. There was a small circle off to the side built into the control panel that looked to be a hologram projector, but it was currently out of use. The rest of the metal was covered in a web of intricate black lines that looked like they were painted on. Even more surprising was that the pilot's hands were dancing over the markings, jabbing, swiping, and circling them in seemingly random patterns. Taylor gasped when she entered the room. By the goddess! The pilot said something in a bizarre language that Benezia's translator could not make heads or tails of. She realized with a start that he was speaking in his native tongue. Anderson said something in response, just as indiscernible, and nodded. The pilot put his hand to one particular array of lines, each of his 5 fingers touching an individual circle. With careful slowness, he moved his hand forward, dragging his fingers along 5 parallel lines that originated in a circles. Benezia had to grab onto the doorway she was still standing in as the ship gave a sudden lurch. By the time Benezia managed to look up again, she could only gape as all the shining dots of stars outside the large front window seemed to be pulled and stretched like taffy before the ship shot forward as if fired from a giant slingshot. Unlike what it would feel like if that simile actually happened, there was no great influx of inertia. Benezia stayed rooted in one spot as she viewed the ship shooting forward like she had only seen done by a mass relay, and there definitely was not one of those nearby. Well, at least not a working one. We have entered hyperspace. It will take about 4.5 hours to get to the Serpent Nebula. Anderson said next to her. He actually looked nervous for Benezia, despite being of different species and knowing each other for less than an hour. Are you okay? Why yeah, I'll be fine. She managed to say as she stood up straight, and quickly looking away from the streaks of light outside the window as they were making her dizzy. What was that term you used? Hyperspace? She nodded and the captain scowled. From what we could glean from the computers of your shuttle, you don't have a similar word in your language. And based on your reaction, I'm going to guess this not is how you planned to travel to the council. No, she shook her head. I have only used Mass Effect technologies for long-distance travel. You mean all your ships are powered by Element Zero? The pilot asked, surprisingly articulate with the Asari language. He sounded both disbelieving and a little afraid. Don't they ever, explode? The Asari was unsure if she should be worried that he was not looking at what he was doing as he swiveled in his chair to stare at her. Well, sometimes, yes. Benezia confirmed, failing to hide her confusion. They knew about Mass Effect technology and Element Zero? Do you not use Element Zero to power your ships? Taylor asked, ripping her eyes away from the hypnotizing view outside the window. The pilot shook his head. Nope, we use good old chakra and fuinjutsu. To prove whatever it was he just said, he slapped the painted-on lines that obviously controlled the ship. For a second Benezia was afraid that he just sent the starship into a deadly tailspin or something similar, but when nothing happened she calmed down. Humans had a pretty nasty experience with a Mass Effect core long ago. Shepard explained, trying to ease the Asari's confusion. When we stumbled upon the plans on how to make our own, no one wanted to build it, much less ride it. So we forgot about it and worked out our own way of flying faster than the speed of light. I see. And she did, kind of. But now Benezia wondered how they could have a problem with a Mass Effect core before they knew how to build them. Seeing as we have time to spare, why don't you give our guests a tour, Commissioner? Anderson asked Shepard, who in return gave him a, why should I? Look. The older human just gave an annoyed look that she managed to survive for 3 seconds. Fine. Shepard sighed before moving to walk out the room. Follow me, ladies. You're ladies, right? She gave a cautious look at Benezia and Taylor, obviously concerned she had just unknowingly insulted them. Taylor just shrugged. Sure, might as well be. At seeing the humans' collective confused look, Benezia spoke up instead. All Asari are of monogender, but we can give birth to children like the females of other species. Our physiques also hold similarities to the females of another race called the Quarians, so it is generally accepted that we are female even if it is not biologically true. Shepard blinked and visibly restrained herself from asking how it was supposed to work for them, much to the amusement of the Asari present. While Shepard was struggling with herself, the matriarch remembered something else important. Captain, I need to ask something of you. Anderson nodded for her to continue. With a flick of her wrist, orange flared around her left forearm and Benezia was once again surrounded by tense, crouching humans. This is a tool used by almost every citizen of the Council species. She tried to defuse the situation. Is that an Omni tool? Venezia nodded, assuming they got the word from her shuttle's databanks but did not know what it meant. Shepard gave it a curious look. I've always wondered what those would look like. Ignoring the odd comment, Venezia brought up the program that had not been used since the Krogans had been uplifted. This is used to program our translators that let us talk with so many species easily. It will take a while, but as the images come up you have to say what they are in your language and then type them in. Though we'll save that for later since we have to know your alphabet first, unless you use an individual character for each word. She held her tool for the captain to see. The first picture was that of a star, easy enough. Captain scowled. Apparently he did not like the idea of going through all of this but knew he had to do it. I mean, it wasn't like every human knew how to speak Asari already, right? Instead of speaking, however, the captain raised his own hand. There was a flash from his fingertips and a ball of light shot from them and into the offered Omni tool so fast Venezia would have missed it had she not been looking directly at it. Over the next few seconds, the images flashed over Venezia's tool far too fast to comprehend. When the screen showing that the program had ended appeared, it was quickly followed by the one showing it being downloaded to her translator. When that finished, the orb of light shot back out of her ARM computer and into Anderson's waiting fingers. Will that suffice, matriarch? The captain said in what, to her, sounded like perfect Asari, but with his lips moving much differently it showed that he was still speaking his native language. A playful smirk was at his lips, probably from the face she was making. He also took the liberty of downloading your translations for the other council species. I hope you don't mind. Don't worry, he stayed away from anything personal. Venezia stared at her now idle Omni tool. That process was infamous for taking upwards of 6 hours. Granted, her original plan was to do something similar in linking their computers, but with the way it was just done she needed some time to think. Yes, that's fine. She did not even fully register that Anderson said, he, like it was a different person who completed the program. She barely paid attention as Shepard took her and Taylor away from the bridge to show them around the ship. These humans were very, very, very weird. David Anderson watched as the commissioner and 2 aliens left. The orb of light flew from his hand again, this time hitting the hologram projector next to the pilot on the side. It immediately lit up to show an AI avatar that looked like an aged old man. Are you sure that was a smart move, David? The supercomputer asked. The Asari language was posted on Skynet before we went into hyperspace. We could have easily used their language when we want to be understood and our own when we did not. Consider it a sign of trust. Anderson replied, looking out the window as the stars stretched by. You just didn't want to go through that translation program, did you? The human smirked. Maybe. These humans had found a way to create Mass Effect technology, but did not use it. Obviously they had something else that worked, and that was what worried Venezia. Even after 2,500 years after achieving it, the Asari could not think of anything to work even remotely as good as mass relays. Even after the Solarians, who were widely seen as the best scientists, joined the council, they could not design of anything better. Even after the Quarians, indisputably the best engineers, joined, something better could not be created. Granted, they never had a reason to try and find something better, but still. What other great differences did these humans have? And this is the mess hall. Shepard continued talking, even though only the younger Asari was paying attention. And over there. Wait, Tila's interruption was sudden enough that it drew Venezia out of her thoughts. Shepard scowled at being stopped, but let the Asari speak anyway. What's that sound? The 2 others blinked and tried to focus on the sound. It sounds like cheering? Venezia admitted. Oh, that. Shepard gave a wide smile that frightened the 2 aliens a little. That was going to be the last thing on our tour, but since you asked. The Hanyo walked to a nearby door. With a practiced ease, she lifted her hand and swiped her 3 middle fingers down the 3 black lines that looked like they were painted on the wall next to it. Obediently, the door slid open and the dull sound of cheering that Taylor heard up instantly picked up to a giant roar that momentarily deafened the Asari. Shepard, on the other hand, raised her arms above her head and gave a cheer of her own to the ceiling. Come on, she shouted over the roar of a crowd, waving to the visitors. Before they could retort, she grabbed an arm of each and physically dragged them into the door, and she was strong. The 3 were immediately lost in a crowd of yelling people. As all the humans were at least a head taller than the Asari, they could not see what everyone was cheering at. Shepard had to push the two aliens forward until they broke through the crowd and hit a railing. It turned out it was a room almost identical to the hangar their shuttle was currently in. The catwalk that was suspended around the border of the metal room was packed with humans of all shapes and sizes. In the center of the room on the ground below the catwalk, two bloodied and sweaty humans were battling it out to the cheering of the crowd. It did not take Benezia very long to figure out what this room was used for, and when she did she wanted to curse. Humans were not just a weird race with frightening new technology, they were a weird race with frightening new technology and a love for brutal fighting. And she had hoped that the Krogan were the only ones like that. To her utter embarrassment, it did not take long for Tayla to figure it out as well and begin cheering right along with their distracted tour guide. The fight ended within a few minutes as one of the humans curved stomped the other into the metal floor with enough force that Benezia worried they were trying to kill each other like barbarians. Thankfully, the downed man just got back up with a smile, rubbing his chin and forfeiting. The crowd roared one last time before things quieted down to a low talking level. The victor of the match took a seat on the floor down in the arena while the loser walked away. "What are they waiting for?" Tayla asked, her voice hoarse from the shouting. "For someone else to accept a fight with that guy." Shepard jerked her head to the victor. "Come on, that's all I wanted to show you, let's go." Benezia let out a relieved sigh as Shepard began to turn away. She would be happy to never see an arena like this ever again. "What do you have to do to accept the fight?" Tayla asked, not moving as she looked at the human in the arena with a thoughtful expression. "Tayla," Benezia said in a warning tone. Shepard, however, gave a wide smile. "Just jump down there and hope he accepts the challenge." Tayla nodded. "Is there anything one should know before jumping in?" By now, the commissioner had moved back and clasped a hand on the younger of the two Asari's shoulder. "It starts as a fist-fighting match, but as soon as anything is used by one person, the other is allowed to use their equivalent. You pull out a weapon, he's allowed to use a similar weapon and vice versa. Understand?" Tayla nodded. "Then good luck." Tayla, Benezia was stopped from trying to dissuade her again when the younger Asari put a foot on the catwalk's railing and jumped over, landing in the crouch on the arena floor with the grace Asari were known for. "Goddess save me," Benezia said as she pinched the bridge of her nose. "Fight on." Hannah sent the text around to everyone in the room. Instantly, all attention was drawn back to the arena and the winner of the last fight looked up. There was a pause as the two contestants stared at each other and the crowd was silent. The human looked at the volunteer with a guarded expression as she began to fidget under the many silent gazes. It was obvious to every human in the room that the man was a bit scared at the idea of fighting an unknown, even if just in a spar. No human liked fighting something they did not understand. After what seemed like forever for the Asari, the human stood up and nodded with a wide smile. As if on command, the crowd gave a roar of approval loud enough to cause Tayla and Benezia to jump. The human slid into a crouched position, what seems to be the stance of choice for humans, and Tayla stood tall. Faster than Tayla thought possible for someone of the man's size, he was rushing for her with his arm held out to clothesline her neck. The Asari managed to roll to the side to avoid it along with the kick that followed up. Just as she came out of the roll, a hand clasped around her arm and violently threw her away, nearly dislocating her shoulder in the process. The Asari hit the ground some distance away, disorienting. Humans apparently had more natural strength than she thought they would. As soon as she managed to regain her bearings, she saw the human was now above her about to execute a curb stomp like the one that ended his previous match. Tayla did not think, just acted. Blue flames licked her hands as she caught the man above her in a dark aura. With a swing of her arm, she sent the man sailing across the room, his momentum only stopping when he hit the metal wall. Time froze for Tayla as she stared wide-eyed at Benezia's similar expression from across the room. Revealing biotics while surrounded by dozens of adrenaline-high, mostly unknown aliens was not the ideal situation. If they thought it was witchcraft or something else that would cause bad reactions, and it could get messy. She needed to. Whoo! The roar of the crowd came back, shortly followed by the human fighter getting up while rubbing the back of his head. "I've gone 5 rounds already." The man shouted to her while shaking his head. "I don't have it in me to fight a biotic. You win." The crowd cheered as the man went to the stairs and up to the catwalk. Tayla could only blink stupidly. So they knew about biotics already? That was good. But what really annoyed her was that the fight had been so short and one-sided that it was almost pathetic. Just as the crowd began to fall back into a wave of dull chatter, it lapsed into silence as someone else jumped into the arena. The Asari did a double take when she saw Hannah standing there with a smile. The last time I fought a biotic, it was far too serious for my taste. What do you say? There was a dense silence and Taylor realized they were waiting for her response. She jerked her head in a nod as blue fire rose from her skin. The crowd cheered. Venezia facepalmed. Trying to get the preemptive strike this time, Taylor shot her hand out. Hannah stepped to the side just as a wave of blue shot past her. Hannah grinned as the black lines that covered her skin, which both Asari thought were simple tribal markings, began to glow white and the crowd cheered louder. Before either Asari could try and figure out what was happening, Hannah crouched and launched herself at Taylor. The previous fighter was fast, yes, but still within Tayla's abilities to fight. Hannah, with whatever those marks were doing to her, was moving so fast she could barely be seen. Taylor managed to get up a rushed biotic barrier, but the human's punch met it before it could fully form and shattered it. The Asari could barely lean back in time as the following uppercut tore past where her chin was moments before. She could see the air ripple around the arm as it blurred past. In a desperate move, she shot another biotic blast at the human. It missed horribly, but Hannah had jumped away and broke off her assault to avoid it. Getting a little reprieve, Taylor quickly cupped her hands and formed a ball of dark energy with the only purpose of collapsing in onto itself. She threw it at the human with a flick of her wrist. The spinning, pseudo-black hole known as a singularity sailed at its target in a way that Hannah would not be able to dodge like she had the previous biotic attacks. At least, that's what Taylor thought. The human jumped high into the air and Taylor was with its angle and velocity. A really high velocity. She would fall back down well within the range of the miniature black hole. Instead, once Hannah reached the ceiling of the room she stopped. Just stopped. Taylor gaped as the human female stayed in a crouched position, upside down, and attached to the ceiling by her hands and feet. Hannah smirked at the reaction, and that combined with her tail waving slowly, she looked very much like a cat that ate the canary to the humans cheering around the arena. Pushing her surprise and small amount of fear to the back of her mind where it could study later, Taylor raised both hands. A series of biotic pulses shot at Hannah. In response, the human began flipping around the ceiling. She would lift her hands and bend away, then plant them and move her feet. She moved around and dodged the dark energy like some kind of demented slinky. Finally, Hannah jumped from the ceiling with the speed Taylor was beginning to associate with the glow of her skin marks. The Asari barely managed to roll away as the glowing mass of flesh and fur blew past her. As they both landed on their feet, Taylor reached out with a hand wreathing in blue. Hannah dodged again and the Asari jerked her other arm forward while her target was midair. But Hannah's tail proved to be more than just for show as it swung to the side and managed to move the rest of her body out of the way of the biotic pulse. She was unable to dodge the third attack though. Instead of pushing her away again, Taylor yanked her hand back to drag the human towards her, hoping it would be disorienting enough to get a hit in. Halfway through being pulled to the Asari, Hannah got her feet under her and slammed them down on the metal, her momentum abruptly stopping. The aura of biotics continued to flare around Hannah as she stuck to the ground like a statue, unable to be moved in the game of tug-of-war. With a grunt, Taylor brought her other hand up to double the force, but it still did no good. The metal beneath Hannah gave a groan as it began to bend under the strain. The human suddenly smiled again and Taylor got a sinking feeling in her stomach. Hannah released the chakra grip that her feet held. As it fired like a bullet, Hannah shot at the Asari who seemed to realize what would happen a second before Hannah did it and rolled to the side. Just as the human flew by, her foot shot out and struck the Asari in her abdomen. Both women went flying in different directions, slamming into metal walls to the sound of the cheering crowd. Taylor regained consciousness to the stern frown of matriarch Venezia. Not the most pleasant way she's ever woken up, that's for certain. I feel sorry for any child she ever has. Taylor was lying on a bench in what looked to be a locker room. A few other humans moved around but they did not seem to take notice of the Asari. I hope that's the last time you embarrass the Asari race, the woman said. You could practically hear the scowl in her voice. Embarrass? Taylor looked over to see Hannah sitting nearby. Even after flying into a metal wall at who knows how many times faster than what knocked the Asari out, the redhead looked perfectly fine. I'll have you know her little stunt probably got her a lot of respect for your people. What? Benezia asked, greatly befuddled. Power is respected. All occupants of the room shivered at the voice and most stared at its owner for some time before eventually getting back to what they were doing. The rest just continued to stare. The owner of the voice was a male human with bright yellow hair. But he looked different from the rest of the humans Taylor had seen so far. Besides lack of tribal markings, that somehow glowed, she really needed to figure that one out. His features were slightly different. Not enough for him to be a different species, but like he had come from a group of humans that had grown up on a separate land from the rest of them. He probably had a different ethnicity. Even before I was born, humans have always loved to fight. And what the heck is up with his voice? The only condolence is that we stopped going into pointless wars long ago. And you? He suddenly turned to Hannah with an annoyed look. I take my eyes off of you for 5 minutes and what do? You go and break your collarbone. Hannah had the decency to look sheepish. Sorry, I broke your collarbone? Taylor yelped, only to wince as she tried to sit up too quickly. Her stomach area was definitely bruised, and badly so. Don't worry, it already healed. Hannah waved her concern off, but frowned at the Asari. But you've been out for an hour and your stomach still hasn't healed. Maybe I kicked you too hard. Taylor gave her a confused look. Why? It's normal that it would take that long. The bruise probably would not fade for another day or so. Oh, Hannah and the male human shared a look. Well then, you heal much slower than humans do. The redhead got a faraway look in her eye, which Benezia noted was matched by every other human in the room sans the yellow-haired man with the odd looks and voice. No sooner had the distant expressions come than they disappeared. Instantly Hannah was on her feet as most of the other humans stopped what they were doing and left the room in a hurry. Looks like we're coming out of hyperspace in a few minutes. The captain wants us on the bridge. Not waiting for the Asari, she left as well, leaving the 2 aliens and the man alone. Come on, the yellow-haired man said as he put an arm around Tila's shoulders and lifted her to her feet. Though because of the height difference, she ended up with him just holding her by the arm in a firm grip. Let's get you ladies upstairs. After silently considering the man for a minute, she decided it would be a good idea to introduce herself. I'm Taylor Vassar, the younger Asari said to the human leading her through the metal maze of halls of the ship, Benezia silently trailing behind. Nice to you. His voice still made her body do odd things. When he did not continue, she got annoyed. And you are? She hedged. He looked at her sharply, surprised, before giving a light laugh. Just my luck. He laughed lightly, causing her injured stomach to squirm. The first time someone asked my name in years and I don't have enough time to do my introduction dance. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. What do you mean no one has asked your name in years? Taylor asked. She carefully ignored the mention of an introduction dance. The now identified Naruto smiled at her. Everyone knows who I am. Taylor snorted in disbelief. I'm serious, he said with a smile. Parents have told their children stories about me for thousands of generations. Right, and I'm the mother of Athame. Taylor retorted. Who? Never mind. She did not want to lecture someone on religion. She noticed a bunch humans scurrying around. Everyone seems to be in a hurry. She noted, not expecting much of a response other than agreement. It's difficult for humans to be in hyperspace. You should see them after they've stayed in it for days or weeks. People look so run down it's like they're dead on their feet. That's one of the reasons they were throwing those fights you stumbled upon. People are stressed out and need a way to get rid of it. Taylor thought back to the humans she had met and talked to, Hannah in particular. They did seem a little tense after they had entered hyperspace. Why is it hard for them? Naruto hummed. I wonder if I should tell you? He asked aloud to himself. It wouldn't be a problem if you become allies, but if you're enemies. He trailed off and Taylor got a lump in her throat. Actually, there aren't many things you could do against us just from knowing about Skynet, and if you ever find a way to join without us wanting you to, Adam and Eve would just kick you out, rather painfully probably. Skynet? Adam? Eve? What are you talking about? Taylor was getting more questions than answers. Naruto thought for a few more seconds, ignoring the Asari in the process, before nodding to himself. Might as well tell you. He looked over his shoulder at Benezia, who had remained silent since they left for the bridge. You're an important person to this council we're going to see, right? At her hesitant nod, he continued. Then can you spread what I'm going to tell you around? I don't want to have to say it twice. The matriarch hesitated at the odd request, but agreed soon enough. Naruto hummed again as he turned back to look forward. Well, you see, humans are born with this seal on them, called an Izanami seal. As they grow, it will spread over their body. When it is complete, usually somewhere in the teenage years, it works with a bunch of other stuff in their bodies and they gain access to Skynet. Skynet is, well, people joke that it's like a hive mind, but that's actually pretty accurate. The two Asari tensed. Stories of the Rachni and their hive mind were still popular. With it, a person can instantly contact any other human and access a massive bank of information in atom with a thought, no matter the distance between them. No matter the distance? The Asari shared a wide-eyed look. As you first talked with Hana and the captain, every other human that wanted to was able to watch the conversation through their eyes. David actually went over everything you said with all the leaders of humanity before responding to anything. At the same time, everything they learned from your language was uploaded to Skynet and given to Adam. I think David and Hannah ordered everyone on the ship to learn the language so they could communicate. Didn't do much good since you did that translator thing of yours, though. Probably right after David got the program, he sent it out to every human on the ship so that they could understand the language of any other species of this council we run into. By now, Taylor had lost the ability to use her legs and Naruto was literally dragging her through the hallways, not that he seemed to notice. Venezia had somehow managed to keep walking, but her jaw was left far behind. Come to think of it, just minutes ago all the humans in the locker room had gained faraway looks before suddenly rushing to work. That was probably this Skynet in action. And that leads to why humans have it hard in hyperspace. Naruto finally got around to answering the original question. Everyone on this ship had been able to access Skynet for the large majority of their lives. The problem is that, while in hyperspace they can't connect to anyone sans the people on the same ship. To suddenly be cut off is torture to them. The timing was almost perfect as they came to the bridge as soon as he finished and Naruto set the now silent Asari in a spare chair. Exiting hyperspace in 5. The pilot called from his chair, placing his fingers back over the 5 parallel lines, the hyperspace control seal. He started to drag his fingers down the black lines until the streaks of light outside the window returned to being normal stars. At the distance, Venezia could see the citadel. In perfect unison, every human except for Naruto gave a relieved sigh as they were reconnected to Skynet. Taylor, I've come to 2 conclusions. Venezia said in a whisper as humans began to move around again. What are they? It seemed she was still in shock, though it had lessened greatly already. I know how the Turians lost and I will do anything to get the humans to be part of the council. What? Why? Imagine it, Venezia told the younger Asari. In a battle between 3 Turian ships and an army of people like Hannah working together perfectly through this Skynet, and utilizing unknown technology that can do who knows what. Who do you think will win? Taylor thought about it, and it did not take long to do so before she shivered. And the second conclusion? Why do you want them to join the council so much? Venezia gave her a meaningful look. Take everything I just said and imagine them as your enemy.